David Sally's here at 7 o'clock. Let's get this meeting going. I call the August 14th, 2023 meeting of the Franklin Village Council to order. Dana, will you take the roll, please?
I'm right here.
Here.
President Lamont,
Here.
trustee Hanson,
Here.
trustee Hanky,
Here.
trustee Goldberg,
Here.
trustee Ehrlich,
Here.
All present and accounted for. Okay, adoption of the agenda. We have a motion to approve or adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
I second.
Second, any comments or changes to the agenda?
So I just have one, so, in our packet on lighting ordinance is still the same May 4th ordinance? You didn't get up there, all right, so then we need to take,
I would propose that we
Remove
reserve
all
that
that,
till
yeah,
next
'cause we
time.
Take the lighting ordinance off?
we didn't get the memo.
Okay,
Yeah, the other thing too is could we get a Word version of it so that we can send red lines to a Word version?
okay.
Yeah, I did send my comments to them.
And I did too.
Yeah, I have comments, I just wanna put
So,
it in a
yeah,
red
But we
line.
didn't get it back either way, so.
Yep.
Okay, so we will take 10B off the agenda, and we'll get the
So I don't know. if
latest
this is-
version out and put it on next month. Kathy,
I don't know if this counts as being an agenda thing, because we're gonna get to the properties and the public institutional.
Yep.
But we've never talked about the Sledding Hill and contiguous properties, and so it's, I mean, I think we should talk about it, but it just thought it was interesting that it's listed as number 8 on there, and it's never, it wasn't discussed by the planning commission.
okay, I think when we go through that, we'll look at, this is, again, the first reading,
Okay,
and we will discuss each one individually, and,
okay,
yeah, so,
sounds good.
I have a question. Last month, we dissolved the cell service committee, and we said we were going to bring this to the committee, treat it as a committee of the whole. I'm wondering, I don't see an item on the agenda pertaining to cell service. I don't need to have one, but I'm wondering if we should discuss how you want to handle this.
the last item talks about Extenet,
Yeah,
which is cell service, not
Okay.
an element of it, not, so we could have a greater discussion there, or we could add a separate item.
well, that's a referral to the planning commission. I'm open, I don't want to lose track of this. That's my agenda here. So do you want to take this up, or do you want to do some work in the interim? I want to figure out a way we're going to organize around cell service and move the work that the committee did forward as a whole. Any emotion around that?
And other than this application, that's all I know that happened last month.
I'll withdraw my change
Yeah.
then.
So, okay. Anybody else, any? Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna take off outdoor lighting ordinance, that's the only change. All in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, minutes of the July 10th meeting, have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any comments? Perfect minutes? No comments?
I thought it was accurate.
I like the way you summarized the comments from the podium during public comments. It just seemed like just the right amount. So I appreciate that and wanted to convey that to you.
Okay, all in favor,
Aye.
Rick?
Question about minutes, were there any committee meetings this past month, the minutes were taken in accordance with your adoption resolution last month for minutes?
I don't believe there were any.
I wasn't in any.
Nothing out of the ordinary.
I mean, I don't know what committees there are right now.
Legal meeting was a week ago, and it's reflected in this agenda.
Okay, the resolution was to take minutes of all meetings. Your resolution you passed last month, so.
Right, yeah,
So there's been no minute, there's been no committee meetings, there's just no minutes.
exactly. And as Mike pointed out, this agenda is the result of the legal committee meeting, so.
I think what Rick is saying is that if there are committees that have met and have not had minutes, that we had last month made a proposal that we would start to record at a very high level what those minutes are, but still to produce them. So I think your question was, were there any committees that convened that did not have minutes that are reflected appropriately? Not to my knowledge.
Well, we just had a
We
personnel
just
committee,
had one, but.
and we've not been able to, we just had a personnel committee meeting, and we'll make minutes for that.
Yeah, yep.
It was a resolution.
Yeah, appreciate
Okay.
it, thank you.
Right, so we'll memorialize a meeting we just had an hour ago.
Okay, so any comments on the July 10th meeting? If not, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay, next, public requests and comments. Anybody in the audience have comments, come up to the podium, identify yourself. If your issue is on the agenda, I ask that you hold your comments until that time, but otherwise, Rich?
Thanks, Bill. Rich Parada, Woodside Drive. First, want to thank the committee and the village for the response to the FOIA request and the T-Mobile cell application, which has been provided. I did notice on the agenda, 11E is a follow-up to the request at the last meeting, which was a formal referral to the Planning Commission. If we're going to talk about it at that time, I'll reserve my comments for that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Any other public comment? Oh,
Just because nothing's on the agenda. I just wanted to, this is Al Becky, President of the Franklin Community Association. Just wanted to announce publicly that we're going to have music on at the gazebo on Wednesday, the 16th. It's featuring a Mark Collins, and there's going to be a cotton candy truck available, sponsored by Linda Novak, and then a pizza mac and cheese truck that will be a fee arrangement to the public. But anyway, please, for the public, please get a lawn chair or blankets and enjoy yourself. And then on Labor Day, it's another roundup for us, parade, art fair, and everyone is welcomed, and we would really enjoy having all our residents and neighbors participate. Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks, Al.
Hi, I'm Eileen Harryvan, your Southfield Township Clerk. I didn't actually plan to come up here, but there have been a lot of people calling our office asking about the August and November election. We do not have an election in Southfield Township, which includes all three of the villages. Upcoming, you'll be seeing some mailings come out regarding early voting. Sometime in the next few months, you'll receive from mail for the office. In the meantime, if you have any questions, call our office, 248-540-3420. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen.
Thanks, Eileen. Any other public requests or comments? Okay, let's move on to reports of village officers and agents. Chief Roberts, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. You have our written submission. I don't have much more to add to that written submission. There are two items, though, that I do want to bring to council's attention, mostly to put on your radar and for discussion purposes, perhaps referral to the appropriate committee. One of them involves Airbnbs, and the other involves estate sales. I'll take the estate sales first. We've had frankly, some problems lately with some of the estate sales that have been going on in Franklin. First of all, they're not getting permitted as they're supposed to be. And secondly, we're finding that, a lot of complaints are coming in about parking, things that could have been alleviated if they had had a permit and came to us and talked to us about handle that. And then we're not getting cooperation from some of the estate sale companies in terms of that, even when we do go out and remind them of it. What we found recently in one weekend, our officers were dispatched out like 10, 11 times to one particular house. Finally, we ended up shutting them down on a Sunday afternoon because they had no permit. We were trying to work with them, but it got to the point where we just couldn't do it anymore. What we also found in some of these estate sales, including this one that I'm talking about on Hellmandale, was that the estate sale company is clearly using it as an opportunity to run a business from the home. They trucked in all kinds of other goods from other locations and used the Franklin estate sale to attract customers, knowing full well that what they're really doing is selling mostly goods from either their store location or from other locations around. They had shelving in there that was pre-marked, Gucci purses here, Louis Vuitton stuff here, things like that. It was clearly what they were doing. So it might be something that council needs to take a look at in terms of the ordinance. The ordinance is pretty clear for garage sales, not so clear with estate sales. We probably need to take a look at maybe strengthening that ordinance, giving it some more teeth, and making it clear that you're not supposed to run a business out of a home in Franklin, but having a estate sale is not really running a business from it. So something to think about. I don't have an answer for you at this time as to how best to proceed with that. You may be, like I say, a referral to the appropriate committee to take a look at it. Along the same line is Airbnb problems. Council is probably aware of one recent incident that we had on Carroll Avenue involving an Airbnb. We were literally dispatched there 12 times over the course of 2 months to handle a situation at one particular Airbnb that resulted in an initial rental to a person, and the person overstayed their rental agreement, refused to leave, created all kinds of problems, mostly civil in nature. There's really not a lot of criminality here. But it was a problem for us as the police department because we were dispatched out there. We always get the calls, solve this problem for us, even though it's really not a criminal problem for us to solve. I will say that, maybe we need to, there's some recent, I know, Supreme Court law on Airbnbs. We may need to take a look at our ordinance again as that goes to give us some enforcement ability should we run into this situation again. Basically, for those of you that may not know, we had a squatting situation where they rented the home for, 30 days, but then refused to leave after that. After you're there for 28 days, tenant rights kick in, and so you can't just go in and throw them out, and that forces the owners of the property to go to court and do a very lengthy process in order to have them evicted from the home, and very expensive process as well. It was clear from this particular instance that the folks that were staying at the home and refusing to leave had done it before. They were very familiar with the legal system, had known exactly what paperwork to file with the court at what time in order to extend it. So I'm not sure there's anything that can be done there. I'm just saying it would be helpful if there was an ordinance that we could have used in that regard. There really wasn't. So those are the only 2 items that I have for you. I just wanted to put on your radar. If there's any questions about that stuff, we can talk either offline or I can answer questions now about either one of those.
So thank you very much for bringing both to our attention.
Sure.
I was unaware of the Airbnb situation and on the state sale situation. So those are perfect ideas to talk to planning commission, see what can be done, our current ordinances, what's lacking. I would 100% support where you don't need to wait till Sunday afternoon. Obviously, you're using your best judgment, but
Right,
right. Clearly they were pushing the nature of what they could do and disrespecting our rules. So,
And that's not the first time that happened in terms of the estate sale. Most are not quite as blatant about it as this particular group was, but we've had it before.
So let me ask you, at one point, our estate sale permit was $1.
Yes,
And I indicated that I thought that was a waste of our time and effort to even charge $1. Did we increase it to 100?
I don't know the answer to that.
So is it still?
It's $1,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm very familiar with this. I do estate sales on the weekends with friends of mine, and it is a legitimate business. I know who you're talking about,
Yeah.
who needed to be ejected. We've done sales here in the village, and we do respect the neighbors and their, and the parking situation. But we do need to increase that. I remember prior to you, Kelda, and when my friend who came in to get his permit came in, I said, Kelda, when Andy comes in, tell him the fee is $1,000, and tell him that I said so. So it was $1 at that time, and we're talking years ago. It needs to be. We need to increase that, for sure.
Right.
But there could be more specific guidelines.
It-
Bluefield Hills has some very specific guidelines about signage.
Right,
and-
parking,
and
yeah.
parking.
And we're willing to help out with,
And we
we
can
have the signs. I mean, we're willing to loan them to whoever's gonna run the sale, but we need to know about them, and then we could talk to them about that, so,
Is this
We'll
a,
talk,
okay.
if we do a referral, chief, is this an ordinance, we've got an ordinance already, it needs to be updated. Is this a planning commission referral, or is this something that we can do, it's an administrative ordinance that can be handled with the staff and the council?
I was gonna say, I think unless there's an objection from the planning commission, it makes sense to me to refer it there. They can look at other ordinances, from surrounding communities. We can provide feedback for any possible solutions or opinions we may have as well with regard to it. That way we're alleviating some of the work on staff.
Okay, just wanted to raise the question.
Stuart and Pete, do you have any comments on this one? Do you-
Happy to look at it.
Mhm.
Okay,
The, both issues there.
The
One-
current state of the ordinance, we just have to start digging into it, but we'd be happy to do it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. That's all I have on that. Now, I noticed on the agenda that the personnel issue for deputy chief position is up next. You want me to go ahead and start addressing that, or? Okay, so, as council knows, we've been talking about this for a little while now. Lieutenant Bastinelli is retiring next month. September 15th is his last day. In preparation for that, as well as my retirement next summer, what we thought we would do was advertise for a deputy chief position that could come in, learn the role of what goes on in the police department, work with me for several months, and then ultimately take over as the police chief next summer when I retire. It would be frankly a way to test drive him or her for several months, and if they work out, great. If they don't, we start over and try again. I do happen to know that there are a lot of good candidates out there. You know, obviously, based on these discussions and others, word filters out there, and I've been getting lots of calls about it from really qualified people. So I'm really hopeful that we'll get some great candidates when we do post this. The Personnel Committee has met. They've discussed it with me. I think they were satisfied with our proposal here. So we're just looking for council approval to move forward with the posting. And then once we get applications in, we can whittle it down based on the qualifications that's listed in the job posting, and get it down to a manageable number that we can interview and go from there.
I'll be happy to make that recommendation as a member of the personnel committee, and we can discuss amongst council.
Go ahead, Pam.
I have a question.
Mhm.
This is the first I've heard of creating a new position, so it's okay. Two concerns that you may have already figured out, and Personnel Committee may have already figured out. One is, this is a second leadership level position in the PD. My experience with adding new job titles is that it's hard to unadd them. So,
Well, I understand where you're coming from
Yeah,
there. So
yeah.
in essence, this is replacing the lieutenant position. We won't be filling Lieutenant Bastinelli's lieutenant position.
okay,
So it's a new title, yes, and they would be definitely this number 2 person on the department, much like Bastinelli is now.
Okay.
However, they would be given this deputy chief title so that then it will be an easy transition into the chief position.
my other concern, it's related. As a member of the Finance Committee, you know, we're facing in the next 3 years some tough decisions as a council. And my concern is about adding on leadership level costs. Are you expecting that this pay level for this position that you're proposing be at the same level as the lieutenant position that Mike had?
My initial reaction, and the way I wrote the posting was, it would be slightly higher than what the lieutenant makes and slightly lower than what I make, but there's not a lot of margin there.
Yeah, I think there isn't,
No, and in fact, at some point next year, I think the lieutenant position will pay more than the chief. So I don't think it's going to be a problem because Lieutenant Bastianelli's leaving, so his salary goes, and then we'll have this new deputy. It may be a couple of $1,000s a year more, I guess is what I'm saying, than what we currently have budgeted for.
Which will only be between the time we hire and the chief's retirement. So
My
only
retirement
4
next
years.
August, right.
This is the first I've heard about it too. Just today is the first time I've heard about this request. Not had much time to consider the implications from a personnel point of view or from a finance point of view. I would move this off session to closed door if that's appropriate at some point. We're talking about people's careers and things like that, and there are obviously some
I
ideas
don't
with
think
us.
it was on the agenda for us to be taking any action right now anyways. right?
Well, yeah, I guess that was my next question. Are you looking for any action from us, Chief?
So
or-
we've been talking about this, just so you know, I raised it during the budget meeting, so it's not a new concept. Ran it by personnel. Roger and I have had extensive conversations about this whole process. And to answer your question, yes, I was looking for action so that I can go ahead and post it. Lieutenant Bastianelli is retiring in exactly a month, and so it would be nice to get this process rolling.
And in fairness, the chief has asked the personnel committee to take this up, and it took about a month for us to get together, pick a date. 2 or 3 of us were there, and we concurred. So I'm prepared to act, but the rest of council needs to.
So that's what you guys met on today?
I'm
No,
sorry.
no, no.
No,
Okay.
But I,
Make the recommendation.
but I didn't even, I was not informed of this from the personnel committee. And as a finance committee, I don't recall this conversation at all. The finance committee talked about the deputy chief position at all. I
Okay,
certainly would
then
have recommended.
let's just land in the middle. We're gonna have to have a special council meeting on this. So let's just move forward with that. That way you get an answer as soon as possible, and we give it the diligence that people want. That's the path forward.
So
A
we,
process question then, to our attorney and Roger. This is a personnel issue. I think there may be some sensitive aspects of it. Can we have a closed session on this? Or do we need to do this in open session?
I think you need to do it in open session. We're not talking about an incumbent. In this case, we're talking about a concept for how you're going to use your personnel structure. And I think that is not something that would necessarily be a reason for a closed session.
I anticipated that we might be talking about individuals because of the timeline and that Dan has outlined. And if we're posting, then there's names and careers involved.
I'll push back against that. The full intent is to hire externally, so there is no identified individuals. We'd only be talking at a conceptual level.
Okay.
Right.
Then I would support doing a special meeting. But here's what I would like to see is I would like to see what the personnel costs are gonna be to the village over this year. I'd like to know what's gonna happen with that job, if that'll be a permanent position. And I'd like to see numbers next year, 2 years, 5 years, because I'll be honest with you, I'm concerned about title inflation.
Yeah.
We've got a 13-person department, and, you know, my question's gonna be, do we need a chief and a deputy chief? And I don't have enough data to even ask that question, so I'm not gonna ask it
Is
right
the
now.
intent to have a deputy chief
It is
beyond
not.
your retirement?
So, you know, part of the issue here is the lieutenant position is currently a covered position under the union.
Okay,
This deputy chief position would not be, and that is the issue. So, you know, if you're talking about making, let's say we just want to replace Lieutenant Bastianelli, and we want to post for that outside and have somebody come in from the outside, then they become automatically part of the union, in which case, if they don't work out, making it very difficult for us to make any changes there.
that's an
Whereas
important
if,
fact.
That's an important fact.
yes.
so
Question.
can we eliminate or suspend the lieutenant's position while the,
Not now, we're in the middle of a contract year, there's no way, you'd have to go to, that'd be a contractual item
so
for,
in effect, we are adding a full new employee. But these are the issues I think Pam is referring to, that we really all need to understand exactly who's what, and I'd suggest we,
You're under no obligation to fill the lieutenant's position. There's nothing in the contract that requires you to fill any singular position. In this particular instance, What we're asking is to create this temporary situation which allows the council to work with staff in finding somebody that looks as though they would be the candidate that you would want to be chief. And you would bring that person in play for 6-9 months prior to Dan's leaving. And then the presumption is that we go back to the old formula in terms of staffing.
And there would be no deputy chief.
There would be no
There would not
deputy
be a
chief.
deputy chief.
Right.
No.
I guess the
So
question
I-
I have is that we've had many police chiefs through our history, and I don't think we've ever had a chance where we've had a 6-month or 9-month trial period adding this role to do that transition, so.
What's the downside?
Cost, I guess, is the
That's
issue, yeah.
But there is no
There's not
cost.
much
Well,
addition.
it's a few $1,000s, but it's some cost, yeah.
Well, except
I
that
mean, we're changing our process.
we
Why are
have,
we changing our process?
we have currently the second highest paid position in the department that is going to be vacant in a month,
Right, right.
okay?
And we'll probably be vacant a couple of months until we can get a new person in, so at saving costs.
Fact here is that
Yeah.
the reason that we are given this unique opportunity, haven't done it in the past, is the alignment, right? We haven't had a lieutenant who is retiring to provide us a window to be able to have a 6-month window.
Well, I don't
From a
know that-
logistical standpoint, it seems, again, totally open to go through and be able to have a forum to ask questions, but just logistically, it makes the most sense.
And you've never had it, frankly, within the last 40 years, you've never had a chief give you this much notice that he's leaving. So,
So Roger, let's establish or schedule a special council meeting quickly and have financial data and available so that we understand exactly. And so if we can do this in the next week or two, that works. Is everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't know if you can get pay ranges, but I'd be interested in knowing what you're talking about for pay ranges.
I think the chief has addressed it, yeah?
yeah.
Well, we have,
No, I haven't
we
heard is this a $90,000? Is it a $100,000?
Well,
A
it's
pay
between
range
the
is a pay
lieutenant,
range.
it's between the lieutenant and chief.
Mike, I think it's
And
simply
ask
laying it
questions,
out.
so let's-
Again, we're going to a special council meeting on this, so let's
Okay.
just save the dialogue.
Okay, very good.
If I could
So
just,
let's do that.
it would have been this is just a little feedback, but it would have been really helpful to have a little more to go on than a bullet point under, with no disrespect intended, Dan. I would have really appreciated kind of so I could think about it ahead of time.
3 months ago, I provided council with a written job description that I wrote for this position, including salary ranges, proposed dates, and everything else. I can't answer why you didn't get it. That's frustrating to me, but it was all written and all provided,
Well,
so.
and
David, you're
again,
shaking
an
your head.
organization, a staffing plan is different than a job description. I'm talking about a staffing plan. What are the moving parts, who's moving there, when,
Okay.
and what the cost of the village.
I would just ask that the council please move quickly on this.
Okay.
I mean, we don't want to lose good candidates that are out there, that I know that are out there, so. And in point in fact, the amount of money you're talking about is peanuts. You're talking about a very small $2,000 or $3,000, which will probably be a wash because you're going to lose Bastinelli for 2 or 3 months during this process. And so you'll probably end out ahead of schedule, so.
And let's
So
just
who's-
vote
no.
on it. If it's $2,000 or $3,000 and that's the only difference, then why don't we just vote on it?
I would propose that we move forward, and I'll make a motion to move forward with the chief's proposal for a deputy chief to replace Lieutenant Bastinelli, and the offset is insignificant in the big picture, and it gives us an opportunity to allow the chief to select someone that he feels may be the next chief, and if it doesn't work out, we'll start the process over again. But I think it's a great proposal, and I have read it, and it was presented to us, and I think that we're quibbling here and delaying what ultimately we're going to decide to do in a week.
I think they're valid question raised. They're asked to have a special meeting to better prepare for it. There's no hurt in waiting a week or two.
Is there a procedural thing to amend the motion or propose a different motion?
I think you
I
need,
can't support that.
well, but I think hasn't been seconded.
Okay,
And if he gets a second, then you need to deal with this one.
all right.
So is there no second?
We have something
Do I get a second?
I'll second.
One second, Rich.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll second.
so we have a a motion to approve the creation of a deputy chief position, basically. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. Is there any further discussion here? Rich, you had a comment?
One quick question, Chief Robinson, is it possible that some of the candidates you think are available are in the same cadence or frequency, looking at other roles? So
Without a
rather
doubt.
delay?
Without a doubt.
Okay, so it's important to get this done from now.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
By
I-
approving this, are we also approving a recruitment and interviewing process? Or are we approving a job description? I'm not even sure what we're doing here.
Well, we're approving chief's ability to post
That's different than what we have here.
and secure candidates. Is that fair?
Correct.
And
Yes.
hire?
That's all.
And hire?
Yes?
Well,
Per my contract, I can be I will be involved in the hiring of it. Now, whether I'm the sole person, I doubt that. I think certainly Mr. Frazier will be involved heavily with that.
Honestly, I think all of us want to be involved in
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah, so,
Right.
your contract does allow you to have a voice in it, I recall that in the
Correct.
language.
Yes.
I think we have so first off, I really struggle to feel rushed to make these decisions on a brand-new position of leadership in the village. I mean, this is the first time I'm aware of it tonight of it. And there are certainly questions raised about the strategy, the plan, the costs. So I think this is deserving of a further consideration. I think we're rushing this. I don't like feeling rushed for a personnel committee of leadership. This is a struggle for me to say yes.
I'm not sure what I see as the rush. It's been thought out, presented, discussed, and those who weren't aware of it are now aware of it, and there's nothing particularly mystifying about it. We know the chief is retiring. This is an opportunity because of timing and Lieutenant Bastinelli's departure to replace that position with a non-union deputy that will work under the chief, and he can determine whether it's the perfect choice for us. We'll all be involved in that. And when the process gets to interviewing the candidates, we can be involved in that.
Yep.
So all I'm suggesting is he would like the opportunity to post this, because he's got some candidates that he's zeroed in on, and we met 2 or 3 weeks ago
How are
and
we
talked about that.
already making candidates for this role?
How many what?
How are there already candidates for this role?
Chief, as the chief described, once the word starts to slip out that he's retiring, and it has gotten
Right.
out, people are contacting him and the village who want to work here. And so there are candidates that have looked at Franklin and said, this is the place I want to be.
David has a point.
So
So
Well,
can
I'll
we
wait my
not,
turn. I'll wait my turn to speak.
so that's all, that's the reality. It's out there. Everybody in the community, in the policing community, knows there's going to be an opening in the village of Franklin. And the chief has a pretty good handle on who he thinks could be a good candidate. I see nothing wrong.
There's several out there. I think the village is going to get some really good candidates that I'm taking calls on already from about a half dozen of folks, and they're really high, top notch. So I think the problem is going to be trying to whittle it down to the best possible one, because there's some really good ones out there.
So, I guess we have a motion and a second, so we're in the discussion section. So, if that's the route we're gonna go, and, I understand both sides of it, and the urgency is apparent. We have to bottle the edges of this, so, if we are gonna, create this position, the position can't last any longer than the chief's existence.
Right.
And then we also have to agree that as soon that this position and salary doesn't commence until Lieutenant Bastinelli resigns, and that the lieutenant position isn't refilled until the deputy's position has been eliminated, whether it by that person succeeding to the deputy or the chief, or, as Chief said, if doesn't work out well, then until we create or we hire a new chief, we're either gonna have a deputy chief, or we'll eliminate the deputy chief at that point.
Right.
And
And they will have.
either hire a lieutenant,
new
or
chief, hire a new
if
chief.
if the chief hasn't, killed himself and for not having a right-hand man
And
for
Lieutenant-
5 months, then we'll have to bring someone else in,
And
but
Lieutenant
they can't be
Bassonelli
two
is-
at any given time.
Lieutenant Bassonelli is departing in 30 days.
Correct. He has put in his retirement papers with the
So
state and everything else.
that's-
He's done.
That's a fact.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's gonna take the chief this period of time to determine the best candidate. We're gonna need to interview that candidate.
Understood, I just wanted to
And
make sure
so
we were
why
clear
waste
on
a
that.
week
Correct.
looking for a special meeting?
So how long will it take? I think we've exhausted, at least in my opinion, the conversation on this. How long do we think it will take to get the information that other council members are looking for between you two? Because I wanna get this,
We still have a motion on the
Still have a
table.
motion on the table.
I'm doing I'm still part of I'm trying to figure out
Oh, okay.
logistically, right?
Right.
Whether or not, would we be able to have a meeting within this week?
No.
No. How much notice do we have to give for a special council meeting?
I think I would suggest that you target the last week of the month. I
2
plan to be
weeks.
gone next week, and I can't help you doing that, but that would also give us the opportunity to get you and anybody else the questions in that we can provide for you in advance of that meeting.
That seems reasonable.
So, we haven't,
Well, we have a motion. I would like to ask whoever made the motion to incorporate my comments, my restrictions to it, so that it is more than just hiring of the position.
All right, so I'll amend my motion to describe the position as a temporary position and a replacement for an existing lieutenant position, and that position will end when the chief retires and we actually have a full-time chief of police. Is that what you're looking for, David?
Is the directive to the chief.
So the chief is gonna post a temporary deputy chief position, that's what you're
Does
saying.
that address your?
are you guys okay with it?
Yeah, Kathy was the one who seconded it.
And then you're
Okay.
okay with the second? Okay,
I can live with it.
Okay.
okay.
Vote?
You had a comment? No?
No, I can live with relanguaging, and I would also like to make sure we have that special meeting,
Oh, s-
so,
So we will,
have a special council meeting, is what you're saying.
yeah.
okay, so all in favor
Oh,
of,
well,
Hang on.
then let's wait till a special council meeting then to have a vote. Why would we?
Why do we need?
Why do we need a
council
special
meeting?
council meeting?
Hang on, can we
We need to-
redirect and
we're gonna
state
have
what
a
the
meeting
motion
to
on the table
interview
is?
the candidates that chief selects. We don't need to wait to have a special meeting to say what we just said. This gives chief the opportunity tomorrow morning to post.
I do not understand the sense of urgency.
Well,
We're
he's-
creating a new leadership position in the village.
Okay, there is a
This is the first
motion.
we've heard this.
I don't understand what the motion is. Please restate the motion. Thank you.
The motion is to have the chief begin to post and seek a deputy chief position. That deputy chief's position will not commence until Lieutenant Bassonelli's position has ceased. And it will go until either that person is hired or is not hired, and cannot go any longer than the chief's existence, at which time we will either decide we want to keep having a deputy chief, we will rehire a lieutenant, or we'll have neither.
Okay, thank you.
All that will be in the posting then, in the placement?
Well,
We're gonna be
that doesn't
honest
Well, that's the motion.
That's the motion.
The motion.
Well,
All right.
the chief is prepared to
He's gonna post
do a
for
help
a
wanted
deputy.
act.
We have a motion, a second, correct?
so we
So
are
in
saying to
discussion.
post it but not hire it. Is that what we're saying?
No.
Well, I don't know, does
Well,
the
that's
chief
what we-
have the
that's what-
ability to hire on his own?
Doesn't on his
No.
own.
No, so then it's completely separate things.
Okay,
He's just
that's-
trying to call someone and say, yes, they said okay.
I just want to clarify that.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody understands it, so,
Yeah.
okay, so the motion is to post the deputy chief position effective September 15th, no earlier than September 15th, until August, we said, of 2024.
Right.
Okay. What other constraints? That's it?
So this is a position from September 15th, 23 to August
2024.
2024.
That's
That's
the longest,
At the
Okay.
longest.
at the
It
absolute
can
longest.
cease earlier if
And it
it
can
doesn't
start
work out.
later. and it can
It'll
start
probably
later.
start later. By the time we post this for a few weeks and then take applications and interviews, it's gonna be, let's face it, November before we probably get somebody hired, so.
So we'll save all that money, not paying anybody for those couple
And I
months.
just want to make sure, understanding that village council will be involved in the interview and hiring process. Okay.
at
All in
time.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Aye. Nay.
Okay,
Thank you.
go post
Thank
the
you,
job.
council.
Thank you.
Good night, chief.
Okay. We have no fire chief or treasurer tonight, so neither of those reports are available. Next thing is our current bills. You have a list of current bills. Do we have a motion to
Motion
approve?
to approve.
Is there a second? It's $206,969.63. Any questions?
Yeah, I just ask questions just for
Okay.
learning purposes. So Michigan Municipal Risk Management, general fund contribution for the fiscal year. What is that? Is that insurance?
It's insurance, it's our liability insurance.
Oh, our liability, like,
Yes.
okay, our liability insurance.
Yeah, we're part of the group,
Yep,
and
yep. That's not health related, that's general liability. Got it.
that's correct.
Yep, got it.
What's the Glass Log Group Legal Services?
The what?
In the,
Oh, glass?
yeah,
That's the prosecutor that works on behalf of the police
Okay.
department.
Does the traffic stuff.
okay, and then
We didn't do them.
the Segway rental for the Labor Day event?
Oh, I had a question.
That too is for the police officers who are out on their feet and enables them to work the streets.
So
without
can you have someone find out what a Segway costs?
Should
At
buy it.
$575 for a 3-day
$10,000.
rental, it would seem like in 3 years we would have bought the thing.
About 10 grand.
I think
Oh,
they're
they're like
about
10
10,
grand?
yeah, because we looked into that before.
My understanding is
They're pretty
it's
expensive.
multiple segways.
Yeah.
Oh, and we rent multiple for that number.
Right.
Like
Gotcha,
three.
okay, then, all right, then it makes more sense, that was it.
We didn't do a motion
That's what it
to,
is.
can we formally do a motion to approve this? We didn't do that.
I said motion to approve.
She did.
Okay,
She did, but
A
I
second.
don't think there was a second, but I'll second it now. I
okay,
don't think
okay,
there was a-
sorry. Okay, any more discussion? All in favor of the approval?
Aye.
Okay, let's move on here. Special reports, I have nothing special to report. Council, any
Yeah.
council?
Well, I do have a question for you, Bill. At the beginning of the year, or at least, I don't remember the exact date, but we created a priority list for the village council. We kind of abandoned that, and we had 2 or 3 working groups toward that, and I feel like we have lost a lot of direction by going through the exercise and never seeing it through. So I'm just wondering what our plan is to continue the work for more focused efforts to the priorities that we agreed upon.
I think we've been working toward a lot of it, David, but maybe we can.
I really don't, I feel like we've hammer and nailed everything. I don't think we've had a strategic conversation for the things that we are collectively going to start to move toward. If you can go through what our priorities were, and if it matches with one or even the top 5, I would agree, but there's just nothing there right now.
Yeah, well, the top 3, remember what the top 3 your priorities were?
One of them is safety, one of them.
I mean, they weren't that broad.
All right,
There's no way they were that broad.
well, let's schedule a separate session and go through it, and,
I just don't want to lose sight of the
Right.
progress that
Well,
we
we
were
should have
having.
that in our folders to revisit. And-
Yeah.
Well, we can get that on the agenda.
yeah, let's either put it on the agenda for next month or
Like,
do,
about to
do a
finish
special.
plowing through like 4 ordinances, and, you know, the historic
have a lot to
zoning. Yeah, when we put that to bed, I agree with you, let's get that. I
So
got it
let's
as a note.
Yeah,
schedule,
let's just keep it
Let's just
as a
get it
regular
back to the
cadence.
top of the-
are you okay putting it on the agenda for next month?
Yep.
Okay, so,
Next month?
next month. Okay, so we're gonna add the,
With utility.
No, let's put it in our packets again
Yep.
so that we can refer to it, and then that could just be part of your president's report.
okay. Very good.
Yeah, another item is, not something to be approved for the bills, but last month there was the question around reimbursement, Bill, for your expenses for the light meter, and then for a luncheon with Representative Talib. At the time, those were a combined expense, and asked that we move towards line iteming so that we know what we're actually approving for those type of expenses. Upon I followed up after the meeting, and the amount of the lunch was $290 with Talib. And to my knowledge, no other council members were invited, no member of the public were invited. The only attendees were you and your wife, and I don't feel that that's an appropriate use of public expenditure, and would ask that you refund that amount. I would have personally never approved that had I known that $290 were going towards a lunch of one of the representatives with anyone. So I can move that to a motion. I don't know if we have that ability or if the bell's already rung for reimbursement. Or I guess we've already done the reimbursement. I assume we've released the funds on that.
That's true.
So I don't know our ability to
The issue-
recapture.
The issue that was asked, if I may, the issue that was asked last time that the attorneys took a look at was whether or not it was a permissible expense. It didn't address the volume, it just addressed the
Yeah.
concept.
Right.
And what we got from our attorney was that it was permissible under the law. Now, the question beyond that is whether or not you as a council want to reimburse it. It's still, it's not a matter of whether it's legal, it's whether or not you're willing to pay.
Right, correct. Yeah, I appreciate the clarification, because I'm at the point where, again, light readers, I bought a light reader myself, and I know that they can vary from $20-40 on Amazon to a very expensive one that's more for professional use. And so the dollar amount that I had previously considered, I assumed was for a higher expense light reader and not that high of an expense going to a luncheon. Because again, personally, I would not have approved that, and I'm not sure other members of council would had they known the dollar amount.
So make a motion, because I would agree with you that I find it unacceptable that the rest of council was not even aware. I mean, we all do what we do. I fly back and forth to Detroit for council meetings at my expense. I've never asked for any kind of a reimbursement, nor would I. It's my choice. And so, make your motion and see if we have support.
I'll make a motion for President Lamont to refund the village in the amount of the luncheon.
Second.
Bill, do you want to discuss that?
Yeah, I disagree with you, obviously. I think, there were several big issues that we talked about, like downtown contamination, wireless service, repairs of historic buildings. We talked about how the federal government can help us raise funds, potential budget earmarks. I think it was productive. They had committed to have more people there, so that didn't show up, so that increased the cost. What we ended up doing is the leftovers were given to the police and to staff here. So I disagree. That I think it was a productive partnership building.
Then why didn't you inform us beforehand?
I just felt that it was my position as the chief executive to meet with her.
But for any changes to happen from a policy perspective within our community, it takes a majority vote
Sure,
of this council.
right.
And again, there may be.
Just didn't seem appropriate.
There may have been meritorious things, but I'm not questioning the merit behind your conversation. I'm saying that had I been informed of the dollar amount, I would not have made the approval that I did last month.
Bill, did you just say it was not appropriate to invite us? Is that what you just heard you say?
No, he didn't say that.
I thought you, okay.
No, in my judgment, it was something that I could handle directly with her, and that's what I did.
I'd like to speak to this, because as the previous village president, I did have meetings. Sometimes the village bought lunch for people. I didn't hold a lunch like that, but I'm personally satisfied that you did the right thing with the leftovers. I remain concerned about the dollar amount. I would be satisfied if we were just to express our concern about this and ask the village president not to do that again. I don't have a big need to do a policy about it. It seems like a lot of bureaucracy to me. He knows our feelings about it. I don't agree with asking him to reimburse the village. But I do think, and just having been in those shoes, I think one of the jobs of the village president is to get out and meet people. I typically didn't do it over food and never with alcohol. But sometimes those situations come up, and somebody on this council has to be responsible to face outward in the village.
To the public.
To the public, but
But it wasn't the
stakeholders and funding sources. You know, if I was out hunting for money, darn right I'm gonna do what I need to do to get their attention and ask for it. She holds the ability to advocate for us if we're looking for some federal funds for some big projects. You know, so that's my 2 cents worth. I'd settle for a slap on the wrist today, but I don't need to go further, and I would not support reimbursement.
I would be more malleable if it weren't this particular situation, because it's been noted on the record that some of us have a very strong feeling about this particular representative and whether.
Regardless, I want to stay out of like the consideration of person. Like I want to treat this in a judicious manner, which is, Pam, I appreciate your insight into it. I still struggle with the dollar amount.
It was a mistake. I take it as a mistake. It was an overly ambitious meeting, and people committed to coming who didn't. People do that all the time. It's a risk you take, and I think that's not a good meeting plan. I wouldn't do that again.
Okay, I will retract my motion. I would like for us moving forward, I know you say bureaucracy, but when we do personal expenses for council members, that it be line item.
Sounds good.
That way, we're just opening up transparency to council for what we're approving and to the public on where funds are being diverted.
I'm totally supportive of that.
Okay, then I retract my motion.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
any other council report? Okay, let's move on to administrative report. Roger?
We talked about it, signs. We had several different things on our list with respect to signs, and I committed just to comment on what we're doing in terms of routine maintenance on our signs in the village. I think it was in 2021 that HRC did an inventory of our street signs throughout the village. And they identified some places where they were the wrong signs, or they were located poorly, or they needed to be upgraded. Our code enforcement officer, as a part of his routine, maintains a list of signs throughout the village as he's going about and trying to identify places where they're either missing or can't be read, they're illegible, they're not standing up straight. Any one of a number of things. It's part of the routine maintenance. We, in fact, got an order today for, what were there, 15? About 15 street signs. We have two different sizes of street signs. And there are some, and I can't even tell you for sure which is located where, but they will be going out, and you will see renewed signs in several places where the signs have faded within the last year. So we're in that process right now. It's ongoing. We've actually jacked it up a little bit in the last several months, just trying to make sure that we do a better job of keeping track of all that. But then there were two other things that you had with respect to the sign code. One was whether or not you wanted to consider a different form of sign, a different type of sign, and whether or not there ought to be a village logo as a part of our street name signs, as they do in some other communities. That I think is something that the council needs to discuss, and we would certainly support you in that.
That's on the agenda later in the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Roger, I still have the issue of 10 signs at the post office crosswalk and 9 signs between 14 and Evelyn. Do we want to do anything with that, or are we just going to leave them all there?
I would suggest that, one, we already reduced some of those
By
signs.
1, right,
Well,
and a
it was
box.
more than that.
Right,
We took them off in both directions.
okay.
And to the extent that you have a council discussion about quality of signs, types of signs, and perhaps frequency of use of signs, I think that deserves some policy consideration. So, I would encourage you to include that in your discussion with the rest of the sign stuff.
Okay. Anything on your report?
End of my report.
Okay. Thank you. Planning Commission.
Good evening. A couple of issues to report on. At our last planning meeting, we discussed the golf cart ordinance, and by majority opinion, we recommend that we not pursue an ordinance for golf carts. Essentially, that was the majority opinion of the commissioners, and influenced by the Chief Roberts' feelings that he had concerns about it. That was our one policy decision, and then we also have personnel changes. Stuart will be taking over for the next year in the Planning Commission. And we have myself, Vice Chair, and Linda Novak will remain the Secretary. And we also have 2 openings now with the departure of Nick Bevins, moving out of the village, and Ann Cangeliosi resigning. We now have 2 seats open, and we have the issue with Al Ludwig still being reappointed for his next term. Not sure what the status of that is, but I think it's my opinion and the commission's opinion that we'd really like for him to stay on. He's a major.
Why is there a question, Peter?
Pardon me?
What's the question about Al?
Oh, just if you guys have reappointed him.
No, we haven't done anything
haven't
yet.
Those will be on next month's agenda.
It's September.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so it'll stay
Oh,
in.
that's the reason. Okay, we
Right.
just haven't, it's not this month, it's
No.
next month. Okay,
Got
Go
it.
through
We
the
didn't have,
30-day
we couldn't
process.
meet the timing.
got it, okay.
Remember, that's what when we created that 30-day thing, we always said it's never can be done the next meeting. There's always got to be.
Okay, thanks for the reminder.
Okay,
Okay, very good.
thanks, Pete.
Pete, real quick, with the decision on the golf cart ordinance, I guess I'm trying to, I watched the video, I think right, Dana, on the website, the video posted for their last meeting is actually the June meeting, and the video for last meeting isn't up yet, just for something for us
So
to
in the
correct.
future.
Yeah, but in the June meeting, there was a request, because I was the person who initially brought that forward to attend the meeting. I wasn't informed of that, so I wasn't there, so I apologize. Would have been happy to come and give some insight as to my thought process around it. And I was a bit disheartened, but appreciate, everything that you guys do. I'm just trying to understand, was it you went out and collected, what went into the decision on safety? Was it purely from the recommendation of the police chief? Is there anything above anecdotal considerations?
Well, it was the police chief. There was one public comment on it, expressed similar feelings. And I think the issues revolved around safety. It revolved around possible abuse, teenager, underage drivers of golf carts. And one of the commissioners mentioned that, we're talking about a real small percentage of people. So, there were 4 that expressed disapproval, call it, and that coupled with the police chief's opinion. You know, I think three of us were a little more neutral, but the majority felt that it would, that it should be not pursued.
So that's interesting, Pete. So I have another house in a community with golf carts. Every community I know that has golf carts, they love them. It is very popular and it's not a problem. You know, it's just such a wonderful thing. So,
Yeah,
you know,
sorry, not to cut you off, because again, it's the reason that we could have approved it, right? And we sent it to the planning commission for consideration for options, things to consider. So where there are safety concerns, is there redressability? In the video that I was able to watch, and I'll watch the July meeting once it's available, was Linda asking about seatbelts, right? A lot of, that is something that we can adopt within an ordinance that would address that, right? And so looking at it analytically, trying to say, what are the true barriers to entry or the things that we really just can't get past? And then for us as policymakers to make a consideration, because ultimately we are the ones responsible to the constituents. We just want to be diligent about considerations.
So I would ask that you, as a council, come together and decide with at least a majority to direct us on what to do. We'll be happy to look into those things.
Can I ask one question? How many people have inquired about this?
I've had 3 or 4,
You have-
which is why I brought it originally.
the community that I'm in, or my cottages, the neat thing with these golf carts, it really makes the community smaller. It really ties them together. It is such a community feel that you're going up to the Franklin Grill, in this case, it'd be like, go to the library with it. It really ties the community together. I mean, that is the sense I get every weekend I'm out there. A lot of people have them. They love them. It's not a danger. These guys go 10 miles an hour at the most. It's not an issue at all.
To that point, that's exactly, I mean, among other considerations, but the thing that really appealed to me when some people brought it forward was that concept of we're uniquely positioned, right? And certainly our state legislature was very conscious of the safety considerations. They baked it into the law and they approved them. But we're uniquely positioned in the small size of our community, right? We're not some expansive community. We're 1.5 by 2 miles. And to be able to have it, being in a golf cart is not the same thing as being in a vehicle, right? There's personally, when I'm in those communities, I feel like there is a more sense of a community. I think that's something that's fighting. For me to be able to go and frequent downtown, if I hop in my car, I can go anywhere. But if I take the golf cart down to any of the stores downtown, come down to the Village Green, like, it just brings, and again, I'm usually a little bit more direct, but a more wholesome sense of community.
I agree 100%. So think about all the folks who are too far to walk downtown, or across the road. This gives them a easy, fun way to get down there and brings community together. I mean, it's a wonderful thing where we are.
So your point taken. I'll work with appropriately less than 4 people, but provide a little bit more direction for you all.
Very good.
So appreciate it.
Okay. Is there a Main Street Franklin report? Susan's kind of been in and out here.
No.
No, nothing to say. Okay. Next is a public hearing. We've proposed some changes to the chickens.
Before we move past Main Street, when is the downtown
23rd.
23rd.
The 23rd of, so let's do a promotion of that because we will not have a village council meeting between then and now, right? Can we just,
You just did it.
can somebody give the time, the date, the specifics?
Wednesday, the 23rd.
5:30 to 9.
All right,
There'll be food, there'll be music.
wonderful.
They've been doing a good job with social
That video
media.
reader.
Yeah, I mean, the summer block party, the past, I
Yeah.
believe, 2 years I've attended, have been absolutely
It's a
incredible.
good event.
Anybody in the audience or watching at home, please attend. It's an incredible event. We just got done talking about a real sense of community, and I think they do a wonderful job of tying the community together through the event, so please attend.
Well, as long as you're talking about that, let's talk about the roundup then too, because we're not gonna have another meeting before that too,
Perfect.
and the roundup is on Labor Day. We are looking for volunteers for helping with setup on the Saturday before. In the morning, we are looking for volunteers on the day of the roundup, from starting at 8 o'clock in the morning until 5:30 in the evening, helping with running games and petting farm and the pony rides and the bounce houses, and we're gonna have the FCA's having a new option this year that we can prepay for tickets, so that if you wanted to pay in advance for tickets, you get 5 free tickets for doing that in total, and you can just come and show up at a different entrance on the ticket booth and come just pick up your prepaid tickets. And there's also a canvas bag we're giving also as an additional thing. These are only, people can prepay if you are currently FCA members. And we would love to have you, and even if you can't, and then you can donate to the bake sale, you can bring your classic car, you can be in the parade. There's lots of opportunities for community involvement, so please come join us.
Great fun. And David, thank you for bringing that up, and you can also come see the Pickering wagon, which we'll have out in front of the Slade House for the block party too. A wagon that used to deliver milk to Franklin Village, 120 years ago.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Cool. Thank
Question for Dana about cars. Dana, question regarding the Roundup Parade. In the past, I think you've arranged for cars, convertibles for council members. Are you doing that again, or? What?
I think Warren
Oh,
Robinson.
Warren will do that? Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
He's still.
I remember that Eileen Polker was very in the middle of that, so that's fine, thanks.
Okay.
Can I add just one additional comment? So David, for your edification, if there's ever an instance where you can't access something, so if you go to the Birmingham Area Cable Board website, their videos are up like in a day.
That's really good to know. I always wondered how.
So I've been
Writing
able to
that.
find it there.
Cool.
So you know that.
Okay, let's move on to a public hearing about the chicken and ducks ordinance. We've proposed some changes to setbacks and size. We've posted a public hearing notice. Is there anybody who would like to make comments at a public hearing, which is now open? Don't all jump to the mic at first. Okay, since no comments, we'll close the public hearing and move on to old business. And the first item in old business is the second and final reading of the amended chickens and ducks ordinance.
Motion to approve.
I second the motion.
And-
One quick change.
Sure.
For proposal 3, could we add before coops, the perimeter of the coops shall not exceed 100 feet? There was a resident inquiry about our fenced-in garden areas, and we're wondering about if you had a structure inside of the fenced-in area, whether or not that would count toward the total square footage. So by defining the contained area to be the perimeter, I think we're providing greater clarity.
David, can you clarify what exactly in 3 you're asking to change?
Yeah, so it would read, the perimeter of the coop shall not exceed 100 square feet in area, the 6 feet in height.
It would be
In
linear
section 3.
feet, wouldn't it, not square feet?
The beginning of that sentence.
Yeah, correct.
So that changes things.
The only thing that
You got
affects our,
that? Or, I'm sorry.
does that affect our second reading? Can we still proceed and finalize it today?
It's not a substantive change.
Then, yes, I'm fine with it.
Correct. So again, it would read, the perimeter of the coop shall not exceed 100 feet in area and 6 feet in height.
Okay. So we have a motion here. Do we want to amend this motion? Mike, did you make a motion?
I'll go.
I will amend the motion in
Interrupting
regard
video
to
game,
David's adjustments.
Second.
Okay, so we have a amended motion to approve the changes to the chicken and ducks ordinance by adding the perimeter of the words in front of section 3. The sentence in section 3. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's move on to the zoning map and the inclusion of certain properties as public institutional zoning district. What we've done here is established a new zoning category. And the intent is to, properties that are not used as, properties, I'm sorry, that are used as public institutions, zone them correctly, or as that. So there have been 11 different properties identified. I suggest we go through these property by property and decide to include them, and then.
Some of us will recuse ourselves from particular properties as it relates to boards and other conflicts that they may
Yes.
have.
Yes,
I have a question.
yes.
Have we settled the parcels? Who owns what exactly where they are? Kathy is shaking her head.
That's David.
Wait, now, we're talking about zoning, we're not talking about his historic district.
Right, we're talking about
Correct.
the zoning, yeah.
Yeah.
But it still technically applies.
There's some
the
overlap
same.
there, yeah, right.
Have we resolved it?
That's a no.
I'm gonna say,
Just
I'm
hear
gonna
that.
say no, because the title work that, I believe the title work that we have now has to be, I guess, questioned. Because the information that we got from the title company is, it's not acceptable to me in the sense of they're having both groups owning several parcels, which I don't know how that's a possibility. They also use the word apparent owners, which also is a little concerning to me for a title company. So we met and I handed all this stuff off to our legal counsel. Peter's out of town right now. We are gonna send the whole package that David looked at and that I looked at and that FCA looked at, that goes by all of the deeds. And I have, all the properties color-coded and followed by the deeds, who owns what. And it is inconsistent with what that title work shows, and it's inconsistent with what records at Oakland County. I had Meg pull up the stuff that, there's a Oakland GIS system, and the Oakland GIS system information with regard to the village property and the FCA property is also not consistent with the deeds. I mean, I don't know, I think any of us were here in 1960 or 50 when it started, or the one deed that got granted in 1960 but not reported till 1979. There's a lot of intricacies that need to be fixed, but going to the bottom line of who owns what, the information that the county has is inconsistent with the information that we have.
That's on the deed.
That's on the deeds. And that's inconsistent with what, the deeds is inconsistent with what we as a village have been operating under the impression of for a significant period of time.
Do you have any sense on when those issues will be resolved?
So, like I said, I went after our last meeting and we said, look, we've got to really break this down. I took it all out again. I redid it all. I found one additional deed that was in, something that the title company had generated that cleaned up one issue. But, I've been through it twice now. I have a color-coded and a chart that I gave to, Peter, and he will forward it to the title company. So the issues of where the property lines are between village and FCA property isn't correct. However, if we were to be rezoning both together, then of course, that's less of an
Doesn't
issue.
make it-
I think it's a little bit more of an issue, obviously, I think on the historic piece of this.
I'm just wondering if we should delay this until we have very specific answers.
we
on
should
it.
delay it.
How-
We've delayed it a lot.
Well, I don't think in any scenario we should be adopting every parcel
Well,
as
right,
a
so
single
again,
motion.
and again, we
Right.
received a letter from, counsel for one of the owners, just so that everyone understands how this was, we have a future land use map category that never had its own designated zoning category. So we had like 12 or 13 parcels in the village that, on our future land use map, call them public institutional, but there is no public institutional zoning ordinance. So a year or so ago, we created the public institutional zoning ordinance with the understanding that we were really only creating it for the purpose of establishing the ordinance. And at the time, it was to also be able to, well, so we had a zoning ordinance category that actually matched a future land use category, because it doesn't make sense to have that, to not have the zoning category. We created the zoning category. At the time, really the only party that came to those meetings was the FCA, at which time some of this questioning of the ownership came into play, and they had indicated that it was really not something that they supported. And at the time, the planning commission said, again, we're only writing the ordinance, we aren't making any recommendation on zoning categories. However, at that time, there was also, the planning commission that made that recommendation was also operating on an understanding that the entire middle swath of the baseball fields was under the village's control, so that if it was to be, if we were only rezoning land that the village owned and not quote-unquote rezoning other people's land, that wouldn't be other people's land. Now with that discrepancy, the issue of whether or not, the middle of the baseball field should be part of this public institutional zoning. After all that was done, it came to council to say, okay, we now have to do something about this, particularly when we did this legal research to find that the FCA property is zoned residential. It is not under the village's control. It's under the FCA's control, and the FCA's limitations on it are contained entirely in their bylaws. There's no other protection, meaning that there's no deed restriction, there's nothing other than their bylaws saying it needs to be open space area. So when that came about, then we as a council, that's where this went to planning, said, all right, well, now we need to relook at all the village's properties, as well as the FCA's properties, and while you're at it, take a look at all of the other properties that are that are future land use public institutional, and determine, one, whether those should now be rezoned, or should they just remain how they are in their future land use category, or in fact change their future land use category. And you should look and see if there's any others. That was what we had. So they came back with, they added one piece, which was the parcel next to Bill Finicum's house, which sort of serves as our drain for the Carroll Drain. They added that as a parcel that should be included. And from what I saw from their memo, they also recommended that every single piece, even those that are owned by private individuals, be rezoned as well.
Except the post office.
Okay, except the post office, I'm sorry, yes. But, so, and that's where we're at now, is it came back to us to deal with each of these parcels, and at our last meeting, we said because of some of our conflict issues, that we would do each parcel on a parcel by parcel basis. Obviously give anyone who's an owner of those parcels an opportunity to be heard.
So there are 11 parcels, and 5 of them, I believe, fall into the category where we don't have clear title definition. That would be the village office property, the library property, the Village Green, whatever that is, FCA properties, Sledding Hill and contiguous village properties. Those are I think, the issues that are being researched.
I don't think the Village Green.
No,
Let's
no,
change
the
it.
only,
Let's
What-
change
what
what you
is-
said,
yeah,
let's
the-
change what you said
well, let me,
around.
let's
And
clarify a couple things.
Take the ones that are village.
As far as this
Right.
list of what you just said, the Franklin Village offices is not in question
Correct.
as to
Right.
ownership.
Okay, so that's a good one then, okay.
Yeah.
The library,
So,
not in question.
Not in question.
The Village Green is the property between the library is sitting on.
That is not in
entire- It is
question
not in
either.
question.
The first, so,
The Sledding
The
Hill,
FC-owned recreation fields and related facilities and the,
well, the church is
well, I don't
nice.
know what they call the Franklin Village Green here.
that's my question, what is that?
That's the,
it's the same parcel number.
that's the baseball field.
No,
the
it's
green
the
is
same
supposed
parcel
to be the
number.
library,
Yeah,
it's just the library property.
Oh, it says the same parcel number.
yeah, it's
Okay,
just the
that's
same
a
parcel
mistake.
number, so it's the same thing. So you can
Right.
just cross it off.
So it's really just the fourth item down.
What's up?
010 and 020, that is the land that has ownership issues. FCA owned recreation fields and related facilities and land.
Right.
Which I don't know why they only list two parcel numbers, because it's more than two parcels that the FCA owns.
Right, it's a whole bunch, yeah.
So,
Here,
why
let's
don't,
see
so
what-
maybe
Yeah.
I think maybe what I was getting at out of all of that was, there are a couple parties involved. And I don't know, we might have representatives from the Huda School today. And I know we received a letter from council for,
From
the fire department, and we all have our thoughts on whether that should be involved. So, since they took their time out of their days to come here, I think we should hear what they have to say, and if we wanted to even take action on theirs, saying yay or nay, we're gonna, don't worry about yours, or yes, worry about yours, and clean up the other stuff, which, again, wasn't really where we were going with all of this. I think planning commission was ambitious, and they, approved them all, and, I will have to say that they did it a little hastily, without allowing some of the owners to have their opportunity to be heard, and I think,
I think it was posted to
So-
invite the other
Yeah,
people, but no
but-
one showed up, is my
right,
understanding.
and that's unfortunate, we get more participation at our meetings, and that's why I think we should do that part right now, and allow the owners to be heard, and give us their thoughts on rezoning their land.
So there's a little inconsistency between the agenda and the McKenna.
Number 8 doesn't exist
Thing.
on this part. There is no number 8. The Sledding Hill and the contiguous
Right.
village properties doesn't exist. That's,
So should we pursue this based on the,
We should be using the one that lists out the parcel identification number.
that's, but that's not the agenda. But is that a problem?
Fine,
Again,
immaterial.
I don't know if we necessarily have to take action, all I was suggesting was,
right.
discuss.
Right, no, I'm with you,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to reconcile it.
Why don't we allow the people that are here to speak specifically to their properties speak
Correct.
first?
Well,
The fire department wants to speak.
Yep.
one second, Rick. Should we just do a motion to talk about the fire department and let them speak and then vote on it?
Motion to allow the fire department representative to speak.
No, to approve the zoning for,
No.
do we have to have a motion just to hear from these
No.
people?
no, we don't, I'm asking the question.
No, I'm not
Okay.
suggesting that.
Okay,
I'd just like to hear their thoughts on
Okay.
where they are on their
Okay.
properties. And why we were thinking what we were thinking, and if we were even thinking it,
okay.
like for this.
I
instance.
appreciate you allowing me to, I deferred my comments because this is the point in time on the agenda. My name's Rick Kozlowski. I'm affiliated with the Franklin Bingham Fire Department. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the Board. I'm here with our attorney, Mark Koszubski, whom, it sounds like you all received his email this morning, and we also provided a hard copy of the letter. So we wanted to make sure that you had that data. It's unfortunate that it just came this morning. Honestly, I'm sure there were notices sent and such, but we actually became aware of this issue this past Thursday. Despite, as I understand it, it's kind of been cooking for a couple, 3
I
months.
told you guys about it at the meeting. I mentioned it at one of the fire commission meetings. We discussed it. Because you can ask.
Okay,
Chief
let me
Agnew.
speak.
We talked
Please continue.
Certainly not in the minutes, but I'm not here to argue that.
about it. Okay.
We became aware of it on Thursday, and hence the actions we took. I just wanted to ensure that you received the materials. I know this isn't the public hearing, but I think the letter that our attorney wrote to you speaks for itself. For the reasons delineated in that letter, the property that the fire department sits on is not publicly owned. It's a private property. It's currently zoned C1. We're in conformance with the zone C1. And we respectfully request that you exclude the fire department from what it is that you're attempting to do with this ordinance. We understand what the ordinance is. In some respects, it's very reasonable in terms of the steps you're taking, but we ask that you exclude the fire department. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's just let anybody in the audience who wants to talk about any of these, go ahead, please.
Hello, so I'm Mona Helmy, I'm the principal of the lower school, Hood School in Montessori down the street. I just found out about the meeting. Somebody gave us a call at the school, which I really do appreciate. I did talk to our school lawyer, and we're just kind of looking over. I mean, honestly, I am not familiar with ordinances or rezoning or anything like that. Ask me about education, but not this. So we are going to look through the information closely and just kind of just understand the process before we can, I don't know if there's going to be future hearings or
Okay.
council meetings about this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Al Becky, President of the Franklin Community Association. I still am waiting for clarification on who owns what property. We gave the village our deeds, original deeds, for the property that we assumed is ours. The village, to the best of my knowledge, has no documentation that they own that property. All you have is something coming out of the county that bureaucratically made a determination that Franklin Village versus Franklin Community owns a parcel or two parcels, and the remainder still is under our ownership.
David, and that's, you've confirmed that, right?
Okay, but it's always been, the village assumes that they own X, Y, and Z parcels.
I don't think that's true.
says that.
I think
That's what he just said.
Hang on, hold up.
Absolutely what I didn't
All right,
say.
I just want to interject real quick.
You need to listen
I
better.
think that your position right now is that there's a land dispute between the FCA and the village. We are not asserting ownership. We are acknowledging that there is still diligence to be done.
Right.
And like, again, our goal, we're trying to exclude, if there's a parcel that has a question as to who owns it, the FCA or Franklin, that be held off until we actually get resolution
Right.
to
Very
those
good.
properties.
Right.
Okay, and the only other comment that I have with regard to the district description is that you should also grandfather in whatever site uses are currently on the property. i.e., I don't know whether our barn falls within the parameters of an ancillary structure. I just don't know. Because again, as everyone else said, the village called on Thursday or Friday and said, we just want to let you know that this is apparently going to be presented in some fashion at the council meeting. And I'm glad that Dana called, but that's the first time I heard about this being formally presented to you all.
So, sorry, has the FCA had conversations around their opinions on the impact of being zoned as a public institutional?
Just general discussion off the record.
Right, so, again, the two issues, and Al, you sat in, I chaired them, and you sat in on several of the meetings when we discussed the ordinance and its contents and what the public institutional zoning does.
Mm-hmm.
And all it essentially does is take what is a special land use approval and all these other zoning categories and makes them, something that's done as a matter of right.
I'm not saying that we're opposed to it or in
And
favor
the
of it.
reason that we were at the time only pursuing village-owned properties was because we were under the impression the village owned majority of what is now the FCA property, which, as it stands right now, as I said earlier, has the protections for the village in the future of, it is zoned R1, and you own the road that runs through the middle of it,
The right of way.
correct? So you own all of the vacated Irving Road and all the land on both sides of it, and it's zoned R1, and the only protection the village has about it not becoming a subdivision are your bylaws.
And your zoning requirements for an R1 district.
Well, that,
Site plan
I know
approval.
what R1 district is, it'd be a nice number of houses running right down the middle of the baseball field. So, the purpose of us now wanting to consider the FCA property being zoned public institutional, not residential, is because you don't have the right protections in place. Record a deed restriction against your property that says it'll never be used for, for anything residential. Then it can stay residential
Wait,
zone.
then you don't trust the FCA.
No,
You know, the FCA has been in an organization here in the village since 1930.
Al, you
And,
don't have to
and
wait 30
it's,
years. I might be dead
we've been
in 30
there
years.
before the village was even created.
You're right,
And no one has a problem with that.
100%.
That's all I'm saying,
But
that you don't trust us then.
It's
I
not,
don't
it's not.
trust the
Hang on,
future years.
real quick. I just
don't
have a
trust
question.
the future years.
I do have a question on the deed restriction around the FCA property in the title work. I believe, and maybe it's only in the bylaws, I'm not sure about a deed restriction, that if the FCA were to wind down, that the properties owned by the FCA would cede back to the village.
Any village,
Correct.
community
In their
group, so if you go to the
bylaws.
Historic
In their
Society,
bylaws,
you
okay.
can go to any village group.
Okay.
And I would not be opposed to including that in a deed restriction. But I think you were correct in that it does appear only in our
So that is
bylaws.
where the concern from. No, I don't say I don't trust you. What I said is that you and I might not be here in 25 years, and I represent developers for a living, and they can get creative. And either a deed restriction or a proper zoning would be the first step of protecting that land. And leaving it zoned residential.
And I'm not saying that we're opposed to you.
Right.
Okay.
That's all we've been trying to do all along.
Okay.
And there has been no animosity, other than we felt it was more important to step it up when we learned this information, that in fact what we thought we owned, we don't.
But if that truly is all that we need to do to protect the property and keep it as it is,
Mm-hmm.
then I think.
Help me understand
I-
why it should stay
Well,
as it is.
hang on, I
don't
do
think
want,
there's any problem with that.
to assert that the whole point of zoning done properly is that residential is treated like residential, so certain restrictions would be placed on those property that would encumber your future uses. If our ordinances aren't doing that, then I agree, it's immaterial on what you're zoned as, and we should put it outside of that one thing, and it doesn't make a difference between, putting a deed restriction in versus, actually putting in the zoning. But if we do this properly, it should be zoned correctly so that we don't have the code enforcement officer coming to you saying, you can't use your property the way you have for 60 years because everybody turned a blind eye, because we all appreciate everything that the FCA does. So that's where, to me, the materiality of what we zone it as makes a difference is, are we going to unintentionally end up encumbering the uses of the property? And we want it to I think collectively, everybody in this room wants the property to remain the way it is, the way it's used. And so, again, I don't think there needs to be any animosity or any friction between the groups, just figuring out what makes the most sense.
And again, we would not be opposed to a deed restriction on the property, but we would like to have some clarification so that we know, or at least the village knows, what they actually own and not
Absolutely.
what we own.
We agree totally, and we're in the process of doing it.
But you've had our documentation since November.
Right, and we haven't done it yet. You're right.
Right.
No, we
Okay.
did it, we pulled title work and like the title work.
Right, right. We questioned the title work,
We
right.
questioned the title work.
Yep. Okay,
Can I just ask a question as a member of the public? So, I'm trying to understand what a operationally speaking, what this new zoning category does. I'd also like to know how it would protect certain properties. I've worked in and around real estate, title work. I can search a parcel map. I've got enough background in real estate to know, and have worked around enough developers to know that they can also get creative about getting rid of deed restrictions, because 20, 30 years from now, that deed restriction won't be worth a lot if someone is highly motivated and has the right attorney. So if this new zoning category would assist in protecting the integrity of the village in general, the FCA's property, I do think it's something worth looking at. Deed restrictions, they sound like a better idea than they sometimes pan out to be, because you've got a deed restriction to sort of give yourself some protection in some category that concerns you. But someone that's motivated enough and has the legal know-how, they can make that deed restriction go away and your hands will be tied. So appropriate zoning can be your best friend. And that's all I had to say, other than if I'm misunderstanding what the purpose of that kind of zoning is, other than it's just a public
You're right on.
institutional use. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think in terms of the property that the FCA owns, we don't do anything until we've reconfirmed the,
I think maybe the
We
only
all
thing
agree
we
on-
should do today is determine if there's any that we are completely
Yes.
taking off the table.
Mr. David has it.
I'm here on behalf of the library. We are supportive of this change. We worked with the planning commission. They've spent a lot of time on this. And we had the original descriptions for the zoning wouldn't have not allowed the library to exist where it is.
Right.
And we were able to bring that to their attention. They were able to adopt it and let us be conforming it as we are going forward. I do want to point out, however, the library property is really the village property, not library property.
Right, right.
So,
So let's, there's about, 6 or 7 of them here we can address tonight. Do you want to go ahead and do that? Is that? So let's look at page 2 of the
Hold on. What about page 1?
McKenna.
That's just.
Oh, gotcha, page 2. Okay, I'm sorry, yeah.
The page number's down in the bottom right.
Page 2,
Okay.
yeah.
So the first item is the Franklin Village offices, including related buildings and land, i.e. Krieger House and Barn. The parcel is 2406, 257, 022.
Yep.
That, the first 2 entries on that are the same parcel ID.
Yeah.
So let's consider those, and I'd like a motion for somebody to, I'd like somebody to make a motion to include that parcel in the
I move.
public institutional zoning.
Bill, I move.
So Mark moves, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further, or any discussion on
Easy.
the,
1 and 2 in.
are you following?
Yep.
me? Okay, David, you okay?
Yep.
You okay, Pam?
I
Okay.
did, yes, I said yes.
So we have a motion, a second, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, so we've taken care of the village office property.
And do library and
Now we have library property, which is the,
village green.
it's parcel number 2406, 253, 024, which is the building, the property that the library building is on, and that, I think it's about 2 acres contiguous to the library. Are we clear on
move.
what
So
we're
it's
talking about?
both,
Yeah.
both though, it's the village green and the library together, because they're the same property number 2.
Correct. Let's just
Okay.
use the parcel identification
Yeah,
numbers.
so it's 2406, 253, 24. You're right, there's 2 different entries on this page. So I'd like a motion to include
So I'll
This
motion
property
to
is-
include these 2 properties.
is a public, in the public.
I'll second that.
institution zone. Okay.
Okay, those are-
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we've taken care of that one and that one. Okay, then the one we will not do is the FCA-owned recreation. That's the 4th one down, which is 2 different parcel IDs, but we'll just leave that go for now. The next one is Franklin Community Church, 2406, 252-001. I have a motion to include that in,
Have we heard from the Franklin Church what their position is?
Gary, do you have any sense of what the church's position would be?
The trustees committed to be a part of the historic district. We did not discuss it.
Okay.
Then I would pass on this for now then.
I don't support this one.
Again,
I'm one vote, but yeah, I would not support.
You don't support consideration? Sorry, I just want to clarify. The FCA, we're holding off until future resolution. I think Mark raised a point that's my concern as well, as we haven't heard from them, so we would want to hear from them before we considered one way or the other.
We're-
That is my personal opinion.
So take that one off.
Exactly. We've not heard from the Franklin Church. Let's pass
They've
them.
already said that they're willing to go historic. There haven't been changes made to the facility.
Understood.
They want to
I
work
would
with the church.
still, have
Two
we
different
informed them
issues.
that there's an option, right? We don't know the conversation. No, were they part of the planning commission, were they part of the conversation for public institution?
They never showed up to talk to us.
So just for your reference, the planning commission spent $1,200 over budget this year on public hearing announcements. So normally we get $1,000 annually for public hearing announcements to make that out. We spent $1,200 over that, so we're about $2,200 of last year for public hearing announcements. Well, what that means is either we're failing in how we're notifying, or people did not want to give us information, but we actually expected input from the individuals at a public hearing. We didn't see anything wrong with moving ahead going forward without actually having the public hearing, with no one showing up. So we figured if we pass it on to Village, that'll get the traction they need to actually make a comment. So if we haven't heard from, I'm not opposed to waiting for them to.
But you feel we should move forward?
We should move, well, no, I feel like, I feel that, this is the venue in which people are showing up, even though we're spending thousands of dollars to get people to show up at planning commission.
Roger, Dana, did anybody speak to the church, or is it just a message left in the answering machine?
I reached out to all of the parties involved, and I didn't hear back from the church.
So you didn't speak to somebody in person, you just left?
Unfortunately, their hours are
Right.
Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursday
Got it.
morning.
Got it.
Let us wait until we have confirmation. They're right next to us. They're our neighbors.
Yeah.
There's no
Let's give
need
them
to
the
rush
decency.
this.
okay,
I agree.
so I think the consensus is hold off on this one?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so let's move on here. Next one, Franklin Bingham Farms Fire Department. They're here tonight. We understand their position. Somebody
I
want
do
to-
not support changing.
So I'm a no on this one. To me, that's not the intent of this. It is being used by that, but I look at it from the standpoint of, if it stopped being used as what it is,
Right.
what would we want it to be in the future? If the village hall stopped being a public building, we would still kind of want this to be public building, because that's all we got. If they're zone C1, if for somehow we don't have our fire department located in downtown Franklin anymore, they'd find another place to go, I would want that to stay commercial.
Yes.
So
So
let's,
I think it should not be rezoned.
so let's do
I
a
agree.
motion and
So
vote no.
Yeah, so I would move to just get it off the list today.
So okay, that's a motion to,
I second that motion.
Yeah.
okay. So any discussion on eliminating consideration of the fire department property?
And while we're doing it, I have the same position for the post office.
Well,
Again,
It's already
it-
out.
the
They're
post
not-
office,
But we're not
Are
even
we already
suggesting.
doing that?
Well,
Yeah,
the planning
It's on
commission
this list.
recommended against.
okay,
Right.
so I take that back, yeah.
Okay, so
we
we have
already have that
we
out.
have a motion and a second to exclude the fire department from the public institutional zoning. Any further
Aye.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, taking care of that one. Next, we have the Franklin Historical Museum and adjoining property. I assume this is all 5 acres because it's not split?
It
think
is
the
all
next
5
one-
acres. Now, this does have deed restrictions in place.
Well, wait a minute.
And if we were to change it from its current use, we would lose it, I think.
I don't think so. We had both. weren't
I have a question on how it's the same parcel. How does,
Because
Well, we're splitting it right now. That's what we're
Okay.
fixing.
it's only,
Yeah.
historically only been one parcel, 5 acres.
right, I'm just,
It never got split.
oh,
legally.
yeah, okay, I get what you mean.
Right.
We're going through the process currently, yes, to legally
So do we
split it.
have a motion to include
I'll motion to
Parcel ID,
include it.
let me finish, please. Parcel ID 2407-226-006, which consists of 5 acres that the Franklin Historical Museum owns, which is currently being split into.
I have a motion to include it.
Is there a second?
I'll second, yeah.
Any discussion?
Do we have the sense Franklin Historical
They're-
Society in support?
They're happy with
Okay,
this.
perfect.
Right. Is it okay with you?
It's okay with me.
Yeah, you
I
can't
shouldn't,
vote.
I won't vote on this one.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Then Huda School. Huda's been here tonight. They have some concerns. I think we probably owe it to them to
Let's hold.
give them a month to
Yep.
come back to us and tell us what you think. So let's put this on
Just to
hold.
help explain to you, so you have a little bit of a historic piece to you, and of course you operate a school, and we love that, and we would love it to always be a school. The concern I have from a planning standpoint is, if you were choosing for it to not be a school anymore, the way it's zoned is, you could sell it to a developer and they could probably good at 6, 7, 8, 9 houses on your property. So that is sort of where we're looking at it from, is, don't know if that's something the village is ready for, is to have you sometime in the long future. These are, again, this is, you know, this is, our future land use has always said it should be continued to use as this, but it's zoned for you guys theoretically to be able to put houses on there, and that's what we're looking
I guess what we
at.
wanna see is, and we just, again, have, Thursday we just found out, but how does that change any ordinances or anything that we can do currently? Does that change anything that we do now? It's just, I understand what you're saying later, but how does that change our business?
Well, and theoretically, everything you're doing right now is on a special land use, so if you were to change things, you have to come to us for permission.
Right.
Zoned is public institutional, it's what you do as a school is a matter of right, so you'd be more into just doing building permit and site planning things and not asking for permission. And I would definitely in this next month, because the zoning ordinance has been out there now for a year and a half, we did it, it's been a minute. So I would definitely have your council take a look at what is now permitted uses into what were currently special land uses and see if it's a benefit. We definitely looked closely at this from the FCA standpoint. Mark, I mean, had a lot of input so that we made sure that the barn back here even could be used for things of a, you know, even of a retail nature. So, there was a lot of thought that went into that. And if it isn't something, or there's something in there that your council says, well, it kind of makes sense except for, we're open to that. I mean, we didn't get your participation at that time, but that's what the intent is. Nothing nefarious, it was really just a kind of, more of a protection thing for us.
And I just provided the ordinance, so you have the written copy and don't have to search for it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
A lot of this is looking forward, not today.
Correct.
So, okay,
So they're on a holdout.
hold on. Then the last one is the Franklin Cemetery.
And that's our property. Do we own that or
No,
not?
the
We don't.
Cemetery Association owns it.
Cemetery.
Parcel 2406-257-023.
That one's a little tougher for developers to get creative.
You got it. No objections from the residents.
So, again, I mean, it's a cemetery as it's currently operating. It's a special land use in the R1. Its future land use should always be public institutional. It's quasi-public, or it's public, quasi-public is the underlying
Right.
name. It would make sense that it be rezoned to public institutional and not R1, but
Have we heard from the cemetery
Yeah.
in a
I think
position?
we can hold off to make sure we get a hold of Steve. Let's get this in front.
So
Let's hold off on
Okay,
them
let's hold.
until we
Okay,
can hear from Steve.
very good. We've done all we can do
But
then.
then the backside was then the one that the planning commission added,
Oh,
which
I'm
is
sorry.
the
About the-
vacant property,
That we
which,
do own.
again, we own. It's probably pretty tough to, we would have to sell it to someone to be used for anything other than residential, but.
David,
So
where
do we-
is that property exactly?
if you go down,
So if you drive down,
Carroll Street, just keep going straight over the embankment and that's it.
drive through the metal
Okay, I know
embankment
where it
and
is.
just start falling down the hill,
I know where it
we
is.
own that.
It's a very steep hill.
It outlets right into the Franklin
Gotcha.
River.
Look
The cool
quickly while
thing
you're
is-
falling down.
David clarified, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So
Thank
let's do this one then to,
Put that as,
a motion to,
I move that it be included.
I'll second.
okay, so all in favor of including the Bowden Road
Aye.
property? Aye?
Aye.
Okay,
Good.
Question, I missed the discussion on the post office? What?
We didn't even
They
consider
never
it.
recommended
They
it in
didn't
the
recommend
first
it, they
place.
took it off of their recommendations, the planning commission.
I wonder why.
Because the same reason, it's that
Stay
it's
commercial.
commercial.
Because it's, oh,
It's
it's,
zone
it's business.
commercial.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
business.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yep. Okay,
Thank you.
all right, couple more items here, we'll wrap this thing up tonight. So that takes care of public institutional zoning. Next thing is consider proposed expansion of the historic district. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties that are, the Historic District Study Committee has spent years looking at this, have come back with recommendation that these 5, that we expand the size of the historic district to include these 5 properties. I think we ought to do these the same way, each property specifically. So let's look at, first of all, the,
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
A procedural question?
Sure.
Similar to the institutional zoning, council's resolution was to get clarity on the ownership of the FCA and village properties to proceed with this. I'm going to ask Gary to come up and advise us on this. We can set that aside, but we're still going to have the issue with the FCA property because we don't know who owns what.
I think you can set it aside because here's what, our ask is different than the zoning question. Our ask is if you agree to the report that's submitted to you or an amended version of that report, that the council then would direct the attorney to modify the historic district ordinance accordingly to a new size.
Change the bound.
So it's all, we can't go through that one at a time. The FCA thing, I think the only thing controversial in the historic district approach is the FCA property and who owns what. So we're in a bit of the same box on that.
Yeah.
But as to the output, though, it doesn't do us any good to have 4 out of 5 if we're going to get the 5th one at some point. If we're never going to get the 5th one, then we'll move forward with the report that we have and get it to the attorney who can then make an amendment to the section 1400, whatever it is, and get that done. So there is a little difference in there. I submit to you the same thing that we just heard, but there's the question of trust is in here. This is not a question of trust for us either. It's a question of trust for some generation 50 years from now. Maybe then there's that question. But I submit to you that everything from the cemetery to Wellington should be covered by the protections of the historic district. It's one more degree of protection. That's what we're talking about. You got a deed restriction, you got a zoning, and if you have the historic district behind you, you have another level of protection, and that is all we're asking for. So, Pam, you want to talk about some of your other stuff?
Gary and I worked on some information for you, which is in your packet. There's 5 properties.
Right.
We also, tried to anticipate what some of the concerns were that were raised in the past, and just wanted to address them directly if people still had those concerns. But I'd like to underscore what Gary is saying is, it's one thing to be in a historic village, it's one thing to talk about it and say that we cherish it, but then you have to do something to make sure it stays. And none of this discussion is about any of us living today, it's about 50, 100 years from now.
Exactly.
And, I don't want to be paranoid, and this is not a personal thing with me at all. It's just about, do we want this to stay a historic district? Well, then, what's it worth to us? And that's really what it is.
Right.
I had the privilege of, doing some of this research with Gary, and I learned a lot. And I thought, well, if I don't know what this stuff, well, maybe somebody else has a question or two also. But, one of the concerns that I heard was balancing property rights with public use, that there's a chapter in the master plan about this. And it's been there since 1967, and it's not coming out. So my feeling is we've figured, we can manage that tension. And we have, and we can continue to do that. So I don't consider that an issue unless somebody else does. But I wanted to make sure that everybody, and especially on council, as we're going into a review of the master plan that the planning commission has been working on for the last couple of years, you know, there's like 6 chapters dedicated to something about historic preservation. So if we decide we didn't want to extend the protections and the advantages of being inside a historic district to some properties that want to be in it, then we probably better have another conversation about this when it comes to reviewing and approving that master plan. Because we're not acting in alignment with what we're saying in this other key document. And you know, I just want to put a pitch in for village character. Bill and I go back and forth all the time about village character. We understand we have different views on this, but we're together when it comes to, you know, let's be thoughtful about what we do here, because what we do now is permanent. And let's have the conversation, as hard as it is, about what we think character means and what we're willing to do to preserve it. That's it. So the proposal is to put these 5 properties into the historic district. And if anybody has a question about another layer of bureaucracy to handle, then he or she can ask it, and Gary's here to answer it. So that's my comment.
I guess
That's an excellent overview.
it's incumbent to just say, does anybody have any objection to any of these properties? And I don't, so I would put a motion forward to,
Well, I think.
Well, you asked the question.
Yeah,
I do.
I don't think that we on this list.
okay. So,
I don't think we can put the FCA on this list. I think it's premature.
I've been led to believe that the council, in discussing this, has always said that the owners have a right to say no.
We're not
And
doing
you would not
zoning right
object
now.
to that.
Not on zoning, we're on historic right now.
No, on the historical district revisions. We discussed this on the board, or in the board, and we unanimously voted that we did not want to be part of the historical district.
So,
Then that creates the issue of another layer, and I personally was present when the Historical Commission made a big, were vehemently opposed to the police station. And they said, well, it's an Indian burial ground, you know, there's whatever. What we're saying is that the FCA property is vacant. It was never considered part of the green, which was the amendment to the district to go to the state. Okay? It's always been vacant. Yes. The only structures on the property are the barn and
Gazebo.
the gazebo. We think it's on our property, at least. And they are not historical structures. And there's no physical reason for us to be part of the district. We are not in any way a structure that has any historical significance.
so then I would,
I disagree with that. I was with you up until that last sentence.
What?
So the reason I wanted to point out that land and natural structures are part of the U.S. Park Service, part of the National Trust definition of a significant historical structure, is that it's land and it's buildings. David, keep breathing, I'll just be done in a
no,
second.
I'm not gonna agree about that, but now we're talking about the FCA property, and we totally made decisions at the last meeting that we were doing this on a
We're-
parcel by
so-
parcel
yeah,
basis.
okay.
And Kathy and Mike are supposed to leave when we talk about, we didn't even do it for the rezoning because it was just, but
Yeah.
now if you wanna start taking action.
Well, I
mean,
think,
we need
but
to-
okay, let me let you finish. 'cause
Right, so, like, are we gonna do like a global overall right now, and then we're not dealing with the parcels, and then I guess everybody can listen because we're talking about everything in totality? But if we're just focusing on the FCA and specifically, then
I
let's
think we have a
wait till-
motion to do them together, which we need to decide, are we gonna do that or are we not?
So I missed that part. What is the, why?
Mike, you made a
materially
motion,
do we
correct?
need to do
Well,
that?
I should,
My question was, does anybody object? And the answer is yes, the
Yeah,
FCA
okay.
objects.
So then we'll look at them
So
individually.
then let's just do it individually.
Well, but if I could just finish my point,
Go ahead.
if I could be allowed to do that. So until I started digging around and talking with Gary about what was actually part of a historic district and what could be considered or not, I remember one of us said, well, land isn't important, it does include land. It absolutely includes land, open land. And we addressed that on page 4. Just as a point of information from a legal standpoint, and it's, Gary, you may be more articulate about this than I am, but you know what, you guys, if that open land is Franklin's brand, I just can't imagine doing anything to let a crack in the wall that land could be hijacked somehow. Creative developer, whatever. It's not about
The
trust.
State Historic Office describes it as a cultural landscape,
Yeah.
meaning it's an integral part of the total district. So
Yeah.
that was simply our position, that it is part of the character defining elements. It's a huge, huge part. And we have all confidence in the FCA leadership and in Al and his crew, and we're sure that they're gonna do the right thing. We're just trying to add layers of protection, not layers of bureaucracy.
That's right.
You know that almost every building in the historic district has undergone some alteration since they were constructed. Nearly every one. And it's the process of managing that change is what we're trying to do here. And anything that's recreational, anything that sports related, any of those kinds of things will sail right through. What will not sail right through, though, is if somebody decides to break a piece off and put in a fast food or some other commercial related thing, or a house because it's zoned R1. We don't want any encroachment like that. So that's all we're doing.
Based off of what you just said, though, what would change about that because what we were saying is the staple of it is the open space. But if we zoned it as public institutional and didn't allow fast food, didn't allow for a house to be built, what is the material difference between the two outcomes there?
There's an additional layer of protection between the deed restriction, the zoning, and now you've got the Department of the Interior, Secretary of Interior standards that can be enforced against that property to help you have ammunition
So
against
they
that.
can still build a structure, it just has to be in accordance with the Department of the Interior.
That's correct.
So we could still lose the open space.
You could still lose the open space, but it would be consistent with the Department of Interior's alterations. And the Historic District Commission and the state would have to find it as such.
It's a new
But,
structure.
so, all right, so in your guys' description of land, it talks about major historic features and landscape features, and it's land. So if somebody wants to come and put a structure on it in the future, you have the right to regulate, one, only its architecture, or whether there can be a structure and what that structure can be used for. Theoretically, what does it mean when you say this extra layer of protection? What I wanna know is, one, why we need it, and what is that layer of protection doing? Does that mean now, after we just rezoned to public institutional to allow the Labor Day parade to go on as a matter of right, they now still have to ask you for permission to have the Labor Day parade?
No,
Correct.
no.
Just if we
Well,
wanted to
forget
build
about it,
something.
the whole Labor Day roundup is right in the middle of this land you wanna
The question
rezone.
is more if we wanted to put a pool in, right? If we wanted to put a new activities center in, that's what we'd have to get approval.
That's right. That would be a hardscape issue, not a use, not a baseball game, not anything that's a game.
I'm not comfortable. To me, the
Building
village
maybe.
council is the highest body in this village, and now what I see this is doing is somehow,
Mm-hmm.
the HDC has a lot of control as it is inside the historic district, and now, to me, it's taking the historic district commission and putting it higher than the village council when it comes to our
No,
own land.
not at all, sir. It can never be, because we serve at the pleasure.
Okay, so can we,
Wait, I have a question.
Let him finish.
Hold on,
Let
time
him
out, time
finish.
out.
Okay.
David, are you done?
Yep.
Okay, Kathy, go.
And Gary was gonna answer, though.
Oh,
Gary-
I'm sorry.
There was a
Gary?
question,
Okay.
I'll let Gary answer.
The reason I can't agree with that is that we serve at your pleasure. You could tomorrow as a committee, say, you know what, I don't like those guys anymore, which is the way they did the postal thing 25 years ago. I mean, sorry, the police carve-out 25 years ago. They just said, everybody out. I'm putting in all new people. We'd have to leave. We'd have no say in anything. That's your prerogative, not ours. We serve at your pleasure only. But our job, once we get it, is to enforce the Secretary of Interior standards. That's all we're here to do.
So this is my question, and this is the question that I've had from the beginning, and the only reason that I've kind of been hesitant and not approving. If we wanted to put in, for example, an athletic center, say we decided we wanted, it would have to look historic. How would we make an athletic center?
Hang on, let's just get practical real quick.
No, that's actually an
I wanna
important
use
question.
I had that question. The community church is a perfect example. They have a playscape. So they tear down that playscape, what does the new one look like?
But that's not a hard structure.
But if it's a
That's not
playscape, I mean, unless it's something really neon and
Right.
blinks, they'll approve it. It'll be
They have to
consistent.
ask for it where they
The
wouldn't have
Department
to
of
ask for
Interior.
it now.
The Department of Interior has bestowed upon the state of Michigan through the State Preservation Office to enforce their rules. They in turn look to local districts to enforce them on the ground, be the boots on the ground people. So yes, in my almost 18 years, which is too long, of being chairman of this thing, we've only been to court one time and we won and that applicant lost. And that was for a rooftop goofy thing. So now, here we are, trying to argue whether we're,
Right?
it was with plastic palm trees that lit up. It would have been really good. Anyway, but we're not,
Let's listen, let's let Gary finish here.
so, and my point is, we're not a higher level of you, and under any circumstance, you have retained all of the control over what we do.
But if a structure, per se, we're going to go in, say the FCA decided we have the money, we wanna put in a structure, we want a swimming pool, we want an athletic thing, we're gonna get
Right.
rid of one of the baseball fields and we're gonna put it in because those baseball fields are our property, we hope, we expect. But how would we have to do that? Would it have to look historic?
It doesn't have to look historic. What it has to do is fit in scale and in massing with the area. So it's, yes, if you were gonna do a bubble thing, that would be horrible, and we would not approve it. But if you were doing a nice, brick and wooden type of structure, it could be approved. It's just a question of making it fit, managing the process. That's what we're doing.
So, just a point of interest, we're having an active conversation, and I think we're boring the conflict of interest, Kathy. I know you're passionate
I'm
about
actually
it.
so curious. I've actually
But
wanna
this is
know.
not, I think this is the conflict of interest. You're driving positions, and I don't think you should have this conversation driving for a vote in the next few minutes.
Okay. I actually really wanted to know the answer.
But I don't think this is the forum for that.
Okay, I just wanted to know. That was it.
I'll help
That's
you
why I
outside.
asked.
We're still just asking Gary questions, and I mean, those were legitimate questions. So I'm still trying to understand the difference between structures and use. So if you're saying that the HTC would have no say on the use that Kathy just proposed in any way, shape, or form, if they were just using that as an example, or let's say they wanted to add in a concession stand in the middle of the area, or add some additional paving where you can have food trucks park. Where is this land that is now historic fall in that context of those things? The rezoning that, for the institutional zoning, has a provision in there that 50% of any building can be used for 49% of any building could be used for general retail purposes associated with the building. So that was all designed so that our Krieger barn, at some time in the future, could potentially, that first floor be used for something. So if somebody came forward and said, during the baseball season, I want to run an ice cream parlor out of there, you guys can't, the HTC can't say, that's not historic, you can't do that.
No,
What-
but
what-
it's
so
a, it's
where
a
is
use
it
incident,
identified?
it's a use incidental to the recreation use. We would have,
That's
you'd
what
get
I'm
no
telling you.
pushback on
That's
that.
what I need education on, is what, this whole use concept, because all you really do with land that isn't have a structure on it is use it, and I wanna know to what limitations are those uses
Yeah.
being constrained?
Can I add one clarification? Because in the way that you responded, I think I'm thinking about this very similar to David. Not what at the discretion would you do, but legally, could you? Like, worst
Right.
case scenario, like everything
Yeah.
through the lens of worst case
Worst case
scenario,
scenario.
could you restrict it?
Could we restrict it?
What, define it, what would you?
Well,
The
You
example
could,
he just said.
you could you could restrict a swimming pool if it didn't fit the
Use
criteria.
the ice cream parlor in the
Yeah.
front of your house as the example.
Are you building a new building for that ice cream parlor, or are you
No, but
doing it out of the?
If you wanted to modify the Krieger barn to sell hot dogs at baseball games,
If there is no exterior
re-
modification?
remember, that's right,
No, you
there's
don't
no
have that.
exterior
It's not
changes.
an
Okay,
issue
so
that-
No, you
now-
would
now
extend-
that
you
same
very well
building,
could
you want
not
to build
modify
a
it.
whole new one.
That's it, building a new one is
You have-
different than.
You have no
than-
say
That's different.
on where it sits,
But
what
you-
it does, other than, because I've always, to me, when I've dealt with historical things, it's always been its architecture. I'm still trying to get my hands around, other than architecturally, things being historic. And I know there's historic lands, but it seems more than just it's been used as an open space.
so
To me, historic land is something historic actually occurred there.
a battlefield site or something.
Battlefields.
Predominantly
Right.
making aesthetic
Right,
judgments.
so that's what I'm
That's-
concerned
that's the
on,
fact.
is
That's
is
what we're
this
doing.
Establishing
So I'm
inside
concerned,
that district.
you know, when you bring up the example of the Krieger barn, you know, we have no use for that Krieger barn now, it's just storage. You know, we've certainly thought about turning that into like a hot dog place for a baseball field with exterior modifications, and we're knocking ourselves out of that.
Well,
Is that gonna be allowed, would that, you'd have to
Well,
ask for
I-
approval?
If the idea was that you were gonna create an opening window out of the same siding and sell
Yeah.
hot dogs out of the end,
Yeah.
I'm sure that would be fine. If you were gonna
They would have to go to you to.
Right.
put on a reflective glass geodesic dome on the end to sell hot dogs out of, then we'd have an objection to that. We're making aesthetic judgments on behalf of the town, on your behalf.
So, if you guys remember a couple of years ago, during COVID, the Kokenspargers built their pavilion?
Yeah.
Okay, that was a new structure in a historic district.
Right.
And we all worked together. Council did, along with the HDC and the architects. And the whole project was designed and approved in 3 months.
Yeah,
And because people worked together.
and everybody's
The
happy.
intention was clear, the purpose of the building was clear, and it was a great experience, but I saw nothing but cooperation and back and forth, and people listened to each other, and we've got a nice structure right now that works and fits.
Yeah,
And
Exactly.
it meets a business need for that restaurant.
we almost always come to agreement with the applicant on what to do and how to do it. 99.9% of the time.
Except that rooftop thing.
That one didn't make it.
You didn't want that, Mike.
All right, so what's
Now
next?
that I know what it is.
Bill, can you move us along here?
I'm sorry?
So,
He
so
moves
again, the
forward.
ask is that you authorize the attorney to amend the historic district section of your ordinance to include these new properties. It's really as simple as that. It's gonna be more complicated, we have to get a surveyor involved and whatever, but that's the gist of it.
Any more questions for
Just
Gary?
one last question. Property 132,020 Franklin Road, that property owner wants to go into.
That, I believe, is what we call the Meldrum House,
Yeah.
which is the Hank Greenberg, the
Right.
baseball.
32020
Yes, in fact, you've talked to her personally. Eileen was
I
on
have
the.
a question about that property as well. So that property, to me, has a driveway that comes in. It's got we'll call it the south side, the old garage and the house.
Yeah,
And then on the left side has about 2.5, 3 acres of open land.
yeah.
What is that being zoned? Is that being in the historic district too?
Yes.
Okay.
The whole parcel.
So if somewhere in the future, somebody wanted to put a house or two on that property, they would just have to do it now, subject to your historical purview.
Right. If you recall, all of the condominiums off of 14 Mile are in our district. And so that was the largest new construction of anything in the district at one time. And we worked very closely with that builder and got, I think, a very nice product, a product that everybody's proud of.
And then
There's no reason they couldn't do that again.
Franklin Community Church also on board.
Yeah, their big thing is they want to market themselves for weddings as the historic Franklin Church. But I went to a trustees meeting, and there's a letter on file from the trustees.
Perfect, thank you.
And so the church, so the historic nature of it is gonna still be primarily to its architecture. What happens if at some time in the future, it's no longer being used as a church?
We don't regulate inside of the exterior four walls. So what happens in there, happens in there.
So that could be rezoned commercial in the future, and as long as it stayed looking like that, which would be an awesome thing.
But basically,
all
that's
that
right.
you're
We don't have
saying.
any jurisdiction.
The regulation doesn't go on to the inside, is still in the zoning and the
Does it
purview
even
of.
stop someone from tearing it down?
It would stop them from tearing it down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we would stop them from tearing it down with every
That it would
Good.
stop.
bit of power we would have.
Good.
Other questions for Gary?
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move
Thank you,
back
Gary.
to the agenda then, and there's, again, 5 different properties to consider. Let's consider 26425 Wellington, the Franklin Church. Do we have a motion to amend the Historic District Ordinance to include the Franklin Church property?
So move.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Hold on,
This is for the Franklin Church.
This is for the church.
Yes. Any discussion on that? All in favor of including? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next is 32325 Franklin Road, village-owned property. Do we have that defined specifically? I didn't look.
It's the house, barn, and shed. It's a Krieger house.
Okay.
And the detail is in the report that Amanda presented several months ago. We didn't include that here.
Okay.
It's
So,
those.
so do we have a motion?
to approve.
I'll second.
Any questions?
And I just personally, I'm not gonna vote. I'm gonna vote against it. My reason for it being that I ultimately want us as the village body to determine how we use our property in the future.
No, we can use it. It doesn't change how we use it. It just
All
changes any
decisions,
exterior
all decisions
changes.
around it. I don't wanna subject ourselves to the state.
So, Dana, will you take a roll call on this one, please?
Trustee Hanky,
Aye.
trustee Hanson,
Aye.
trustee Ehrlich,
Yes.
trustee Goldberg,
yes.
president Lamont,
Yes.
trustee Solid,
No.
trustee Salter,
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. The next is 32020 Franklin, the Meldrum property. Do we have a motion to include that?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think the FCA properties, we want to hold off on that until it's well-defined? Or do we want to?
That was our agreement, yeah.
Okay, okay. And then the last one is mine. I will recuse myself. Mark, will you handle the last one, please?
Motion to approve 26475 Scenic Highway House Barn, Lamont House.
Second.
Discussion?
Any discussion? All in favor?
I have I have one discussion item, I do. I mean,
Suspense.
Is it too late now, or what?
I
Go ahead.
understand it's already passed, but I have a couple questions. One is, if you've chosen to jump all the way to Bill's house, why didn't you bring in the cemetery? Just curious.
It's already in.
Oh, okay, that answers that,
Yep,
okay.
yep.
Why not include every house you can?
And
If they're willing to do it, like, why not?
There are non-contiguous historic districts. Farmington Hills has 20 of
I
them.
truly question its historic nature, but I know you want it in, so I'll vote for
If
it.
you go to that report, that there's a core of the house that was built by an early settler, and I think that's the
Look, if
rationale.
somebody wants to make their house historic,
Yeah,
we're not
yeah.
gonna object. My issue was more the how we got stretched out to Bill's house, but if you're saying that the church in between, I mean, the
There was a-
cemetery in between already is included, then.
Right.
There was a big ask when I bought my house to deem it historic.
Let's just,
There's, I think, a history of that.
Okay, I think we're done with this one.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is work paths. This says consider committee on work paths, but we established a committee last month of Sally and Hanky. Is there anything to report, or we just,
David has written a mission statement?
Yeah, so again, we'll formalize, this for consideration next meeting so that I can circulate it ahead of time. However, as an initial impression, and again, feedback welcome, the mission would be to improve safety and connectivity throughout the village of Franklin by identifying locations of potential safety paths, analyzing the options for the installation of such paths, and making recommendations for the consideration of council. Again, important in that is that there's not individual decision-making authority to the subcommittee. The objectives is to perform logistical analysis to identify potential locations of safety paths, what options we have at each location, and the associated costs and other considerations for the installation of each safety path. Again, a lot of this work has already been done by the Planning Commission. However, I think just doing, kind of collecting all of that historical information, packaging it up, getting the additional considerations for cost and things like that, is ultimately what our goal is.
so I think some of this was, let's come up with some priorities so we can go after funding in terms of
Yep,
grants.
exactly.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's I'll come with a written,
Yeah,
with it
and-
actually more
and
formalized
to
and
work
then the
with the
priorities.
planning commission to get the planning commission focusing on which of the possible connectivity areas they should be going after initially, or what we'll call the lowest hanging fruit. And there are definitely a few out there.
Perfect.
Okay,
I think someone wants to speak, Bill.
Rich wants to speak.
David, within the scope of the committee, the FCA is currently working on a path in the open space.
Mhm.
Is that considered in the scope? or is it
No.
something-
No,
Okay.
yeah.
okay, next item is village street
So
names. Oh,
are we creating, what are we doing?
It was
no,
already
yeah,
created last
We
time.
created it last month,
Mark
Yeah,
and,
it's just an update.
Correct.
yeah,
of what
Mark and David, so.
let me know if you want.
Yeah.
Because I know the property's back.
Awesome.
Yep, I think David hit it, that a lot of this stuff is
Yeah.
on the shelf. We just need to dust it off and prioritize it. and-
Identify the heavy area.
Yep,
Yeah.
cool,
Agreed.
very good. Village street name signs, in terms of branding and style, do we want to do anything with this issue, or do we not?
Again, I personally am open to a redesign or something making it unique to the community. However, I think we need to do cost
So,
considerations.
yeah, so I think the reason at legal we brought this here was for that exact reason, is it, should we, whether we have a little, just one individual, or we actually have administration do it, but the first thing we need is an inventory. Like, how many street signs do we actually have in the village? And then running a cost analysis, what will it cost to convert them to wood? And then, there's all types of wood ones, there's just stamped wood, there's carved wood, developers use all kinds of different types of street signs in different communities, and that would be the whole branding aspect, is let's get a cost if we have to replace 1,000 signs in the village, and every sign is $400, that's sort of the analysis, and then if that's the case, then, all right, well, obviously we weren't gonna do that, so maybe we do, 50 a year, or what, so that's, exactly, I think
yeah.
what we're planning on looking at.
Roger, real quick.
What's the process of doing an inventory? How,
Pardon me?
doing an inventory of signs?
Well, we have a list of all of the signs.
Every
now.
street sign?
Yeah,
So,
We already have
how many we have? Just curious.
off the top of my head, I don't.
So I think that's obviously the first
Yeah.
step. is
Right,
to
so that was the
say
point of
we
this
have
being on the agenda. Should we
X
look into it?
hundreds of signs, and then we could decide that we want to take the concept to a sign company that
Right.
does that professionally. you know, I mean, whether they're wood signs or metal signs, like in Bloomfield Hills, they have beautiful gold and black street signs. And see where at ballparks, given our financial situation, it's unlikely that we would agree that that's something we want to do in one fell swoop, but would we want to stage it over the course of a 5-year period?
So this is where I go back to Roger.
Yeah.
You said we're currently doing an inventory of signs that need to be replaced because of damage. Are we actively replacing them right now?
Yes. Well, it's about 20 signs.
Yeah.
And by the time we got through this, the assumption that we've
Okay.
had is that this is gonna take some time, no matter what it is.
Yeah, so I think the first step is just to,
Yeah.
just find out how many actual street signs we have, and then we can discuss
Right.
that.
We're talking about
Maybe
street
separate.
name signs.
Street
Street
name
name,
signs,
yeah.
Scenic Drive and Wellington and that.
And would you consider separating out like what's in the historic district, and maybe we would start with those first? Because like in,
Yeah,
pick a group.
that makes
yeah.
sense.
That would definitely make sense, that maybe the historic got its own separate little brand than
So
the
I
rest of
think-
the village. That
So
would
I
make
think
sense.
this is in Roger's court here, come back to us with an inventory.
If you could get us that list of signs, or with just that count, that would be the first starting
Right.
point, then we could start feeding that out to various.
Then, like Mike says, let's find a potential supplier and get some idea what the costs are. So,
We'll get that.
okay.
It's like when we did the welcome to Franklin signs, there's a company in Ann Arbor that I found, and that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure there are sign
When you're
companies
doing a
that.
village, I'm sure you can get a rate.
Right.
Mr. Reuters has a comment.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, there was an email sent out in 2020 from a sign recommendation that was done in May of 2020 that has a list of all of the signs, unless there's been a new street added. You can go through and actually just, there's a spreadsheet. It's a copy through, and I got that from the village in 2020,
Well, thank you.
so.
Forward it back to
So,
us.
okay.
I would
So let's-
As the new planning chair, could you please circulate that to council?
Stuart, I'd prefer Roger to go count personally. You have just,
Yeah, sorry.
I prefer Roger to count personally, and you just give him a short.
And he can start tonight after the meeting.
I didn't bring my flashlight.
So Roger, send out some information on this. Let's put it on the agenda next month and figure out what we're gonna do.
Quick question, is there consideration on branding and style for potentially the village's upcoming bicentennial?
Yes, that's what we're talking about. I mean, it's among the things.
I think it's a driver, absolutely. I mean, the disrepair is one, but the opportunity is that the bicentennial's coming, and,
It's actually good timing.
and it's really good timing.
And you never know, there might be grant money out there. This is for road improvements
Yeah.
theoretically.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
It
move
could
on.
be doable.
Let's move on.
Okay, let's move on to the next issue, which
Talk about
is
online.
a resolution
No, I don't.
supporting potential relocation of the Pickering Barn in Franklin. It's in your packet here. And this is done with
Discussion?
request of the Planning Commission, I guess, to look at potential options.
Bill, discussion? We have not, as a council, made the consideration or discussion about even bringing this into the village, or what our interest is, or what the vision is. This seems to me putting the cart before the horse. We've not had any kind of strategy or conversation about this yet.
No, we've not. This is the first conversation about it.
Maybe what we should do is have Peter
Pete?
Yep.
give us a
So
rundown.
really, it's just a request to do some analysis. And maybe our analysis will say that it's not a good idea to do it. But the general idea would be to give it its best chance, and, I think it involves a lot of factors. And I think the Planning Commission's in a good position to bring a lot of groups together to give it its chance. And, it may involve, depending on the sites that we consider, it may involve factors like parking, funding, economic development. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. And, it's simply just a request. We have an excellent planner and an excellent, McKenna is an outstanding planning consultant. And he could help us use his resources to look at possible ways of turning it into something positive for the village, something viable.
So,
I would just say, and also, get, a big part of a process like this would involve grant seeking. There's money available. So I think we could help
Peter,
at
we've,
least
you know,
explore
as a
those.
council, we've not had any before we start spending money on McKenna or engineers or consultants, we've not had a conversation, you know, do we want to do this at all? This is putting the cart before the horse.
Well, I guess that's what this is.
Right.
If you guys don't want to do it, then,
And Pete, what's the timing on this? I mean, doesn't it have to be removed soon?
well, I think if the ball could get rolling, you know, it could be a year-long thing.
Are they willing to leave it sitting there for a year?
No, sadly.
Well, that's
Oh,
why I'm
well,
asking.
no, are they willing to leave it there for a year? That would be something we can find out
They're
pretty quickly.
required to leave it for a certain period of time, right?
They were, and I think it's over a year,
I
so.
thought it was 2 years, Peter,
It 2 years from,
last
I
year.
think, August of last year. Yeah.
So we got another year left.
So we have another
We
year.
think, yeah.
I think
Pretty-
that's,
pretty
that's
much.
the point we're getting
Right.
at before
And
we.
I think the point on this isn't necessarily village money. This is private investment
But if we're spending McKenna
facilitated by.
money, that's
Yeah, we're
village money.
spending a little money on McKenna, no question, right.
We've not had any conversation as a council, is this something we want to pursue?
So let's talk about it.
Good.
I have a question.
Well,
Oh, sorry.
I mean, Kathy, you want to talk about it? We have no written vision, no strategy, no ideas, we have nothing to.
I guess
I think
that's
the
what
whole
I'm,
point
trying to do
is
is
to
develop
ask,
that,
to
right.
give them, they wanted permission from us before they spent their time doing this, is whether this is something that we would even consider.
Yeah.
I think is where, when I listened to your guys' meeting, was the gist of what I got out of it, was we don't want to waste our time if council isn't even directing us. This is coming sort of as a planning commission initiative, if you will. Normally, things are initiated by us, so they're asking us, and that's what they brought to legal, was the ability to use their time, and I guess to some extent, it would be their resources if they do engage McKenna, but they do have a McKenna budget. Now, if you spend $4,000 on McKenna and have to come to us next year with an over budget, I think that'd be something that, you know, Mark might raise back at you, is you shouldn't have spent $4,000 with McKenna on your Pickering project when we didn't really have that going anywhere. But if you're just talking about, you know, Chris is, I can't imagine McKenna having to spend that much time. The things you're talking about are really trying to find what is a practical location, and then if you found a location, how could it be used there?
that's fair.
So the
Yep.
two possible, I'm assuming they are either somehow it becomes a village or quasi-village property, much like the Krieger institution is, or it gets used for some type of commercial purpose on, somewhere in the village
Yeah,
where
it
it would house it.
Something like that,
And I
a
heard the
correct.
guys' discussion about the, the property at 14 and Franklin.
Mhm, mhm.
But Pete, you've had a long time to think on this. This has been your pet project.
Mhm.
Where do you envision that this building would be?
Well, you know, one opportunity would be right at the corner of 14 and Franklin Road, the green space there. And, you know, our economic development director had explored some of these things. And
Who?
It was David
our previous economic development
Oh.
director, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But did anybody speak to the owner of that
So
property?
I did, I know John Gottesman. I said, oh, John Gottesman, I'll give him a call. So I did talk to him a couple of times, and he's open to it. But like any businessman or business person, you know, it's got to be something that a lot of people are behind and would help with. And obviously, it's got to make sense. And I think that's a big component for me. You know, the Krieger project is a wonderful thing.
Would you clarify when you say that a lot of people would have to be behind and supportive of, is that he?
Investors.
No, is that, who's purchasing the land? Who would own the land that it would be put on?
Current owner.
He owns it.
Right.
He owns the land.
Okay, so
Well, you know, I guess that.
logistically, I'm trying to just play this out.
But
in my
I
head.
would say this, David, that would be the kind of thing we could explore. What mechanisms could help us make something like that happen? I know, Pam, you had talked about how we have limitations in our charter about Franklin Village owning land. So these are all things we could explore. And we have good, you know, Al Ludwig is a very experienced developer. He could offer a lot of good input on this. And, you know, I think we could perhaps come up with something that's exciting.
This is where I struggle, you know, this project's been going on for a year. We already have the Krieger House, which costs us $40,000 plus a year to maintain. The barn, you know, so we've got a growing collection of buildings that get very little use, if any.
So I would say this.
So,
Go ahead.
in the last year, as this project, they're moved on, they're laying their sewer work and doing all their work right now, so, you know, we don't have clarity about what we do with this building on village property land, and I struggle thinking how we're gonna help a private person, you know, raise it for them. That's a separate consideration for our scope and our role as Franklin government and village planning. Certainly we would work with them for zoning if they need zoning issues or other things, but, you know, for us to contribute time, money, energy to help them develop their land, I don't think that's in our scope.
That's fair, and it's exploratory. You know, one thing that our economic development talked about was critical mass, getting enough retail space to possibly enliven the downtown. You know, he insisted we need more retail space in order to attract some mixture that would be good for people who live here in Franklin and would offer us some new businesses that could be gathering places or things that are useful for people who live here. But it's all the kind of thing we could explore. And like I said, we may come up to that conclusion.
So, we have a perfectly good barn downtown in the commercial district. It's never been updated or modified. Perfectly good barn, it's huge.
Pardon me?
We have a perfectly good barn already downtown that's in the commercial district that's not been developed.
So this barn's significantly bigger.
Well, but I mean, we already have a barn downtown.
And that may be also something that we explore. That may be our conclusion as well. And, you know, I'm just asking for a chance to put our efforts behind it.
So we have a motion to approve the relocation of the Pickering Barn resolution. Can we just go ahead and vote? And are we, any further discussion?
I have a question.
Sure.
You go first.
Okay, and this isn't logistics, anything like that, because you know, conceptually, I really like what you're talking about, and the Main Street Board is very aware that, you know, you need retail to get retail. And we're kind of below the water line in Franklin, and I appreciate the efforts to try and bring some of that into the village. And I'm a champion of that. My question is, what's the right role for government? So, it struck me when I was listening to you that this research might be a project for the Historical Society, because it's consistent with the mission of the Historical Society. And if a reasonable location emerged, that could be then turned over to the Main Street people, the economic development people, who have a staff member and resources to actually build the business case to put the barn in the village someplace. Maybe it's that location, maybe it's elsewhere.
But I
I'm
think-
struggling a little bit with what's our job in this.
But I think he's looking at people who have expertise in building, like where could it go? And I don't
Yeah.
think the Historic Society has any of that expertise.
That is a
Okay.
limitation.
So the expertise
And
there,
also,
okay.
you know, the land use issues.
Yeah. Okay,
Because it's so multifaceted. And I think, you know, you look at Krieger, there's a feeling, or it's difficult for it to support itself. And, you know, and maybe we would learn things about that too. We'd say, you know, maybe there are some things that Krieger, you know, there's these avenues we could pursue, whether it is grants or whatever methods. This is the kind of thing we could explore more to find out, you know, how can these things be brought to life a little more.
What I struggle with is right along with Pam saying, we've had Krieger for, how many years, 15 years now?
since 2000, Bill came to planning
Yeah,
in
so-
2009.
So it's been a
Yeah.
long time, we've struggled to do anything with it, it's beautiful, it's there, perfectly fine. I did not realize it's even bigger than the farmhouse barn? It's bigger than that barn behind the farmhouse?
Oh, yes.
Oh, significantly, yeah.
like
I mean, we're talking
10,000 square feet.
6,000 square feet.
So, you know, I'm struggling, so the only places available to us are like the Village Green I mean, that's massive. So,
And it
so,
may-
you know, I am not interested in another large building, make this Greenfield
So
Village
I
here.
guess, but are you interested in us exploring the question?
No, I'm not,
hang on,
because
okay.
if it's
Uh,
not.
That's what you're saying,
So-
and if that's.
Okay,
Can I finish, David? So, the only large places for building that size is like public land. And so I'm not interested in the village starting
And
another
exploring the
giant
idea,
one.
which is okay.
And then, otherwise, we're helping a private company put a private owner.
Hey,
not-
we're helping the
We're
village, of-
we're
and in my
facilitating.
opinion, the people we're serving is our residents, by making our downtown more vibrant, or whatever it is.
I would support
Okay.
that if the owner of that parcel was interested in developing a
Right.
building
Right.
into another restaurant or a barn, a bar,
Right.
or some sort of a retail establishment. But we have retail space in buildings in our village that are empty.
Right.
And so we're not at that point to say, let's add another one.
I
That's
guess,
the reality.
as a planning commission, you know, we put priorities
Yeah.
together recently, and that's one of them that's pretty significant, you know, the retail space in Franklin that we would like to work on as a planning commission. And yes, these are all difficult things.
Yeah.
It may come to nothing, but, you know, it's just an offer
What-
for us to try and explore it more and.
Could the Franklin Cider Mill use that?
Oh, you know, so thank you, David, or, yeah,
Michael.
Michael, sorry. Yes, absolutely. You know, I talked to Laura Peltz about Pickering and, you know, how it could be unified with the cider mill and with the downtown Franklin, turn it into a regional thing. And Laura, I haven't gone to her largely because I'd love to get a little more, you know, support and backing and say, you know, go for it, you guys see what you can do. But Laura tells me that what people want and what she hears from them is, you know, once we come to the cider mill, where can we go? Is there somewhere we can walk to? Again, it's just something worth exploring, you know, the synergies that could come about. You know, I think that cider mill, the number of people that come to the cider mill could support some of these things that, you know, might help us.
So let me, hang on, give me a chance. All right. Again, let's just look at this logistically. You're asking for consideration, not for a decision. Do we have, list of questions I have right now is like, who owns the barn? How much will it cost to acquire it? How much will it cost to move? How much will it cost if we don't put it on public lands? When does the decision, what's a drop dead date for a decision to be made that we have to take some action, not just consideration amongst the planning commission? So of all the questions that we have to consider, how much of that goes to McKenna? How much have we, I don't remember off the top of my head, how much have we allocated toward consultant fees for the planning commission? What was the differential for last year for how much under you came on that budget? Because again, I have no problem with you all considering it if it collectively is something the planning commission wants to do. But what I don't want is for it to then encumber consulting fees that we're going to need, for instance, for the safety paths.
The struggle I have just asking to do it is we don't have a clear plan. What we want to do is counsel for this massive barn in the first place.
I just want to understand
So
the
why would
cost
we
because
spend
we don't
time
have a
and
plan.
money and
So
energy?
what is our investment to getting to even remote consideration of a plan? Because all of the things that you were saying, I think to Mark's point is if they need a destination to some other historical thing, that has existed for 15 years and it has not been capitalized on. And so now, rather than diverting our attention on how we can actually, in my mind, truly honor the buildings that we have right across the road here, we're now going to introduce another structure that we're struggling with those two already. So we're just spreading out our attention to the improvements even further, right? Like the narrative of the destination already exists. We have historical properties that are in the focal point of our community, legitimately the best location of our community, the heart with green space for families to go to, and we have yet to effectively capitalize on that.
I think the most relevant thing I hear there is about the cost of I think it's trivial, most likely, far less than developing an ordinance for McKenna to, the cost that you would be involved. Pardon me?
What's the average cost for?
And it's a good question. Care to venture one, Stuart? Do you have the budget there? What are our monthly McKenna expenses? 2,500, 400? Yeah, it's a very minimal
Couple
dollar
thousand
amount
That's
in
what
my,
I'd say.
Yeah.
I'd say a couple thousand
Right.
bucks.
Right.
Real intensive ordinance, maybe McKenna's in the course of a year spending 3 or 4, from my experience.
right. So, yeah.
I have some some serious reservations. However, I'm inclined to want to support this request with some with some conditions. One is if the planning commission thinks this is a worthwhile effort. Number 2, as a potential investment for the village. And with some pretty clear scope of, I noticed, for example, that the request that came out of legal committee was to find a potential location. I'm questioning that, and, because all we're talking about is down in the village center and creating a transition from the cider mill into the downtown, which we already know we need, or that we've talked about certainly in the village. We haven't made a plan around it, but this would be the beginning of a conversation that could result in a plan, in my mind. What I would not support is an open-ended, just go and build a conceptual plan, and let's put some boundaries on this one, either a not to exceed on the dollar amount, or some deliverable for you to come back to the council.
Yeah. I think we could have a report ready in 2 or 3 meetings, something like that, at the most. But I
A
haven't.
report in 90 days with the cost not to exceed $2,000. Can you live with that?
I think so, yeah.
What do you guys think?
I think this is crazy, because spend 2 or 3 months developing a plan. We don't have the time, we don't have the money to do this in light of what this barn requires. We're like 5 years late to the party to try and figure out what to do with this thing.
I think this is facilitating private investment. This is not a village expense.
That's not a planning commission role.
Yeah, I think it is.
No, it's not. That's
Yeah,
not
this is
economic.
some-
Economic development, like in the past, we've worked on things like, parking.
We're
Obviously,
stretching the boundaries because we have a historic agenda. It's like, that's what we're stretching.
No, I think it's
So,
wrong to look at it as a historic preservation effort only. It really is, I think, about vibrancy of the village.
We have a perfectly good barn in the village center already that's never been touched
Are you
or
talking
developed.
about
So-
the one behind the farmhouse?
Yeah.
Where I used to live
So let's conclude this one and
All right.
vote on this resolution with the 2 restrictions that you give us a report in 90 days at a cost not to exceed $2,000.
And was this voted on by the planning commission to bring it to council? What was the general?
It wasn't a formal vote, but I think that was the consensus.
The intention was for Pete to take it to council to then.
And this is something that you all want to invest your time into, as well as part of your budget. That's the part that, again, to me, if you all want to consider this, I give deference. I don't want to micromanage every single thing that you're working on. But at the same time, I also want it to be a priority because I'm not sold on this, so I'm not going to pretend that I'm.
Currently, our docket is fairly light, so as far as prior timing for the planning commission, I don't feel like it's egregious to spend time on something that could improve the development and especially the retail development of our village, which is partly kind of, one of our things we're trying to improve in the village is having more places to shop and allow people to come downtown. So, it is definitely aligned with some of our goals. Is it gonna be the number one priority coming from council? It might not be. We can let you dictate what that priority would be, but at the same time, there's time and we have resources available to look at this. I don't see a problem with looking at it.
Okay, Dana, will you take a roll call vote, please?
President Lamont,
Yes.
trustee Solly,
Yes.
trustee Salter,
Yes.
trustee Hanky,
No.
trustee Goldberg,
Yes.
trustee Ehrlich,
Yes.
trustee Hanson.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. One last item, we have a right-of-way application from Extenet for a, what do you call this, a new pole at 13 Mile near Woodside. We need to refer this to the Planning Commission to,
I move to approve it?
Second.
so there's a motion, and a second to refer this application to the Planning Commission. Discussion?
Go ahead, you go first.
What is this based on the follow-up from what Rich provided, last meeting, or what are we asking the planning commission to do with this? Offer public
Go through
hearing?
our ordinance process.
Yes, there's a process they need to go through, which includes hearing.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Lost my train of thought. Do you know, did they change the location a few feet as you had suggested it?
Yes.
They did?
Yes.
Because I looked at it too. It looked, as far as, look, you know, if we have to have a location, that it does have a pretty good distance from the few houses around it.
It's
Better than it
at
was.
least 150 feet, it may be more than that from the
Okay,
closest
that's good.
house.
Okay, good. So they did
it's-
cooperate in that
And
regard.
also, the new location is about 10 feet higher, because there's a big elevation, which,
That helps as well.
which helps also, too.
Right,
so.
so at least they were able
So if
to
I'm-
tell us the.
Okay, any other discussion about referring this to the planning commission? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Oh, motion, meeting adjourned. Oh, can I knock that off yet?